Welcome to Tentpoletrauma, the podcast where we look at movies that came with hype and high hopes, but left with crushing disappointment, either critically, at the box office, or both. Freed from the weight of expectations, we seek to examine these underperformers under a new light, parsing through the good, the bad, and everything in between with the hopes of gaining a better understanding as to why they failed to find their audience. Warning, there will be spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie that we're discussing today, I suggest you stop the podcast and go watch it. Then when you come back and listen, you'll get more out of the discussion. This episode, we examine 2018's Solo, a Star Wars story. Like any child of the 1970s, I loved Star Wars. When I was very young, my dad took me to see the original movie in theaters, and it blew my mind. I collected the toys, waited for 3 agonizing years in anticipation for The Empire Strikes Back, and devoured anything Star Wars related for a decent chunk of my pre-adolescent life. But then came middle school, girls, rock and roll, and Return of the Jedi. And though I more or less enjoyed the capper to George Lucas's original trilogy, the presence of the Ewoks indicated to me that I had probably outgrown this stuff, at least for my teens, and I pretty much put a galaxy far, far away, far, far away. This was easy to do, as for the foreseeable future and well into my young adult years, Star Wars was as dormant in pop culture as it was in my consciousness. When George Lucas chose to re-release the original trilogy in the mid-90s with new special effects, my curiosity, if not my fandom, was reignited. I had several friends who had remained huge Star Wars fans and collectors over the years, so I tentatively joined in with their excitement to see these new versions in the theater. But the minute I had seen how Lucas had tinkered with Star Wars, now awkwardly retitled A New Hope, I knew something was wrong. I didn't see how any of the additions improved the movie. In fact, in most cases, they made them considerably worse. And to this day, I don't understand why the franchise's creator felt the need to tweak with what, in my opinion, had already been a pretty great trilogy. This sense of unease stuck with me through the announcement and development of the prequel trilogy, and I was one of the few people on planet Earth that was not hyped to the gills for the first installment, The Phantom Menace. But when it came out, I dutifully saw it, and even upon first viewing felt that it was more or less a terrible movie. I thought the depiction of young Darth Vader was laughable. Jar Jar was even worse than I imagined, and I didn't know what Natalie Portman was even supposed to be doing. I was even let down by the Jedi characters played by Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor, 2 normally dependable actors. The Darth Maul lightsaber duel at the end was the only thing that even mildly quickened my pulse, and I wasn't even that impressed with the gobs of, at the time, state-of-the-art CGI. So imagine my dismay when most of my Star Wars-loving friends declared it a masterpiece and went back to see the hot mess multiple times during its run, emerging more glassy-eyed and rapturous with every viewing. I chalked it down to some sort of weird mass hypnosis or brainwashing, and I just kept my feelings to myself as best I could and let them have their fun. But I was not in any way excited for more of the same. The fervor did calm down, and most of my friends gradually returned to their senses, and life went on into the new millennium. The prequel trilogy rolled out, and though I enjoyed the next 2 films a bit more than The Phantom Menace, my overall opinion was that in terms of acting and storytelling structure, these were bad movies. By the time it all wrapped up, I was checked out of the franchise entirely, and I would not at the time even have considered myself a Star Wars fan. Then, in 2012, the announcement came that George Lucas had sold the franchise to Disney, and I began to hope again. Not because I was a Disney fan, anything but in fact, but because George Lucas was letting go of the franchise. While I have a massive respect and admiration for the man, it seemed clear to me that creatively he was not taking input from other sources, and as a result I felt his storytelling had gotten too, well, up its own ass. The thought that new creators, people largely from my generation, the ones who grew up on Star Wars, that they were going to be given the reins was exciting to me. By the time the first film in the new trilogy, The Force Awakens, rolled out, I was pretty hyped. And while I'll save my thoughts on the Disney era for the podcast, suffice to say that I was back in the fold. I could call myself a Star Wars fan again. Despite rumblings of behind-the-scenes troubles, things seemed to be going pretty well for the Disney era of Star Wars right up until the end of 2017. I had heard about the kerfuffle with original directors Lord and Miller being fired and replaced by Ron Howard, and I wasn't exactly chomping at the bit for a Han Solo prequel movie to begin with. But I was looking forward to seeing Solo in May of 2018 when it was released. I was initially Luke Skywalker warm on The Last Jedi, and though I anticipated a backlash for that movie, I was not prepared for how wildly divisive it proved to be. Even more surprising was when, some 5 months later, Solo saw release and was met with a deadening wave of critical and box office indifference. I honestly never imagined a Star Wars movie could fail, not even in relative terms. So how did this all go off the rails? That's what we're here to talk about on this episode of Tentpoletrauma. Ron Howard's Solo, a Star Wars story. All right. I'm Sebastian, and I'm here with Troy.
Hello.
And Chris.
Hey, how's it going?
And we are here to discuss Solo, a Star Wars story, the most infamously low box office grossing Star Wars movie of all time. A real anomaly in the franchise. So Troy, would you call yourself a Star Wars fan?
I would absolutely call myself a Star Wars fan. I was about 6 when I saw it, the re-release in 78 or 79. And like most kids of my age, that was my entire world. And I pretty much learned how to draw and just study stormtroopers and costumes from Darth Vader, and that's how I learned how to draw. I had the one-sheet poster with muscle-bound Luke, the chest.
Oh, yeah.
Muscle chest Luke. So it was a big deal. And I was down with all the sequels. I was young enough that Return of the Jedi I thought it was awesome. And I even liked the Ewok Adventure television shows, because that's how young I was with that. So
that is hardcore. Chris, I know you're a Star Wars fan. What is your brief history with Star Wars?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I grew up with it. Me and my brother would go see the movies in the theater, and it's pretty much the first movie I ever remember seeing. And I was young enough to enjoy the Ewoks as well. And I would call myself an originalist because, I'm definitely all about the original movies, about, the despecialized editions, and I don't really, I've seen all the Star Wars. I like them. But the original 3 is where my heart is.
I tried to, for the longest time, only view the Harmy edits of those until the recently, when they came out with the 4K editions, I kind of cried uncle. And, now it's like, those look so good. I have to just go with that. And I was going to hold out for my son, who's now just watching the original trilogy. I was going to force him to only watch the despecialized editions, but it turns out his favorite scene in A New Hope is the reintroduction of the digital Jabba. So,
what?
You need to have a stern talking to him.
You failed as a father. You failed.
I can't fight it.
Chris, how do you feel about the Disney era of Star Wars, post prequels?
I thought it was a great way to get the series back on track. It kind of stumbled with the prequels. I wasn't a big fan, but we hadn't had Star Wars in so long that it was super fun just to hear the laser blasts and the themes again. But it felt like the right move for Star Wars and Lucas to just give it up. And I really enjoyed the Force Awakens. I thought, even though it was a little bit of a retread, we had to cleanse the palate to get us where we needed to be. And then when Rogue One came out, I was like, oh, that was a great 1-2 punch. Here now is a standalone that really works and shows us that fits into the larger umbrella of the story in a nice way, but still, pays homage to the original movies. And then we got Last Jedi, and, that was like one of the most divisive for Star Wars fans anyway, movies. And then when we rolled into Solo, it had lost a little bit of momentum. But I feel like with The Force Awakens and Rogue One, Star Wars was back and it was cool and it was great again. And I really enjoyed that.
As far as Disney acquiring Lucasfilm, I just feel like this is sort of the best thing that could have happened to it. And yeah, there's elements of it that, of course, are a little. There's some hiccups and some bumps in the road, and I was not really a Last Jedi fan, but the prequels were a big disappointment. I saw each one of those in the movie theater, and instantly, like minute by minute, as those were going on, it was just like, oh, this is horrible. But I kept my hopes up for each one, and pretty much forgot about those right after they were done. But yeah, when Force Awakens was happening, I suddenly felt as excited as I did when I was a kid and Return of the Jedi was coming back. It was like it sort of reinvigorated all of that all over again. So, and
Yeah.
and so Seb, you and I we were lucky enough to go to that screening at the Samuel Goldwyn Theater,
Yeah.
and see it with Abrams and Kennedy and Kasdan all there.
Yeah, that was so
And
great.
it totally delivered. So it just, yeah, I mean, I remember we both walked out and was like, that was awesome. Like we just looked at each other and it was just like no complaints. That felt like Star Wars again. And so as Disney's been handling this, I just feel like they have, as much as a studio can, has handled it with as much care. And even down to what they're doing at Disneyland. If you have not been on the Rise of the Resistance, the new ride, it's one of the best.
Well, I've been on it. It's great. Chris, have you been on Ride of the Resistance?
Fuck you. And fuck COVID.
It's amazing. It's really great.
It is probably one of the best ride experiences I've been on.
Yeah.
So you can only imagine, Chris.
Maybe like in 2023 or something, Chris, you'll get to ride on it.
I'm gonna pull a John Candy in Chevy Chase in Vacation and just get a gun and force my way onto that goddamn ride.
I am in agreement with you guys. I actually really have enjoyed the Disney era of Star Wars. I recognize that the movies have not all been perfect. I recognize that there is a sort of problem with perhaps not having a strong overarching outline that the directors were following, especially in regards to the Skywalker trilogy. And I accept that, there are problems there, but I have really enjoyed it. And as somebody who didn't like the prequels pretty much at all, I really was back on board when Force Awakens and Rogue One hit. So, I know we all had mixed feelings on The Last Jedi. I have sort of come around to it ultimately. I think it's pretty good for the most part. But that sort of brings us to Solo. Now, when Solo was announced, Chris, how did you feel about it? Just the idea of a Han Solo prequel.
I wasn't that into it, I mean, I remember hearing, that Lucas had plans to feature like a teenage Han Solo in I think in Revenge of the Sith. And I remember thinking like, that's a terrible idea. Who wants to see a teenage Han Solo? That it just didn't make sense to me. But when I heard that Donald Glover was cast as Lando, that gave me hope, and I got actually excited because I always wanted to see. I'm also a big Miami Vice fan, and I almost feel like a Han and Lando movie would have the same dynamic, and they'd be out doing drugs and doing all these crazy seedy things, and that would made me more excited. But I don't feel like anybody was clamoring for a Han Solo movie, whereas Rogue One had a very specific story point to address, and and new characters and things like that. I feel like it was impossible to for an actor to step into Harrison Ford's shoes and just to explain what about his character. We kind of already know.
It's interesting, Chris, that your attitude was like that when this was coming out, because you are probably the biggest Star Wars fan that I know of, and so you couldn't muster up the excitement for it. And Seb, I don't think you were kind of on the fence.
Yeah,
And
I didn't think it was a good idea. I didn't really. I wasn't really looking forward to it, but at the same time, I was open to it. It was like, if they're going to do it, I'll watch it. And if it's good, it's good. But I
Yeah.
certainly didn't, I had no desire for that. I didn't want a Han Solo movie
Yeah, I
at
mean,
all.
I saw it opening night. Don't get me wrong. I'm a Star Wars fan. I'm gonna see it. So it wasn't like I was dreading it, but I was not excited.
I don't know. I've seen every Star Wars movie, even the prequels, in the theater, and the word around town was meh. And you guys saw it first, and then I asked each of you like, how was it? And both of you were kind of like, it's fine. And I just couldn't bring myself to see it in the theater. It
Oh, you never
just
saw it in the theater?
no. This is
Wow.
it's the
Okay.
first Star Wars movie that I did not actually see in a movie theater. I've seen every single other Star Wars release in a movie theater.
See,
Yeah,
I'm the nerd that saw it in the theater and saw the 3D just to make sure I had seen every single version. And I'm like,
I don't even remember there was a 3D release of it.
that was the last gasp. Yeah.
and I even remember there was a Millennium Falcon, a life-size Millennium Falcon they had built on Hollywood Boulevard, and I remember walking by it and thinking like, I still can't get excited about this. And it's the same reason, like a young Han Solo who's not that much younger, and it just kind of had the feeling like, it's like in the 80s when there were soap operas and they were like, the character of Debbie McGrath is going to be played by Susie Phillips, and they would just switch your actors, and then
Yeah.
suddenly, you'd have this different person. It just kind of felt like, why are you doing this? And to a character that is part of the original three, the part of the trio, and it sort of works when you have a person like, somebody older who's, Obi-Wan, or somebody, you can see them when they're younger, because that's like a entirely different phase in their life. But it didn't seem like this was that far in the past from the Harrison Ford that we had lived with.
I
So,
think we're supposed to believe that it's about 10 years before we see him in A New Hope. It may be less than that. At the end of the movie,
yeah.
he talks about how he's going to go hook up with Jabba. So, I mean, I don't know technically what the timetable is there, but that's what I was sort of assuming. And I agree with you. It's not far enough of a time that it makes you want to see it. It's not like, oh, I'm seeing a whole different stage of their life. It's like,
Yeah, it's not like Ewan McGregor playing young Obi-Wan, where it's, you can believe it, you can get into that, and it's interesting and it's not distracting. But like, this is distracting from the concept, the thought of, we're going to have to readjust our minds to try to look at this as Han Solo. So now we have to think Eldon. How do you pronounce his name?
I think it's Alden Ehrenreich.
So now we have to think of Alden Ehrenreich as Han Solo.
Also, in all fairness to Harris, to Ewan McGregor, and Alec Guinness had one movie with cameos in the other two, whereas Harrison Ford was in 4 movies,
Four of them.
four
Yeah.
Star Wars movies at this point. So like his Han Solo is etched in our brain, whereas like Ewan McGregor, I feel like had a little bit more. The age difference as well, but he had a little bit more leeway to play with, I feel like, because he
Yeah.
was much younger, whereas, yeah, this guy's just kind of fitting right, 10 years before we knew the Han Solo that we know.
Hey, Chris, so were you following the production of the movie, and were you sort of aware of the issues with the original directors, Lord and Miller,
Yes.
getting replaced and all that? How did that sort
Yeah.
of color your feeling about it?
It definitely made me less excited, but at the same time, I mean, Rogue One had issues too, and then that came in and was pretty damn good. So I thought there was hope for it, but between that and the concept being a little soft for me, I definitely went in with limited expectations.
Yeah, this might be part of the reason I was a little apprehensive about seeing Solo, because early on, so I was involved with the infamous Josh Trank Boba Fett. Not involved, but I was working on Fantastic Four. I was storyboarding that with Josh Trank, and I've been his storyboard artist since Chronicle. And he came in one day and he said, dude, it's greenlit. We're going to do the Boba Fett movie and you're going to storyboard it. And he gave me his pitch on it, and it was pretty awesome. And So I thought I was going to be storyboarding a Star Wars movie. And as we continued our production on Fantastic Four, that dream slowly started dissolving away. And you can go online and probably find out all the little, I mean, everybody knows the story there if you're a Star Wars fan. So yeah, the Boba Fett material obviously kind of got recycled into The Mandalorian. And that slot was supposed to be something that I was going to be working on. So when it finally, they replaced that project with Solo, I had a kind of a bone to pick with it. It was just sort of like,
You're like, fuck that movie.
yeah, it was a sore spot with me to begin with. And so I think now thinking about it now, that's as I'm sort of, this movie's getting released, it was just like,
You were so close to storyboarding a Star Wars movie. I can see why that might leave a bitter taste in one's mouth.
yeah.
But did you, when you heard about, were you paying attention at all to the whole kerfuffle with Lord Miller and getting fired?
I think I had heard a little bit. I wasn't following it as closely as some of you. I had heard the Lord and Miller getting fired. And honestly, I still don't really know. I haven't done the deep dive into the whole production story. So it's a little confusing to me. Like from what I understand now, and we'll get into this obviously, but that it was pretty much entirely reshot.
What's your feeling on Ron Howard as a replacement director for Lord and Miller?
I mean, I think Ron Howard's a perfectly competent director. That's kind of how I always picture him. He's like a guy who just brings the story, brings the film into port, and there it is. He doesn't really have any, like, to me, visual stamps or feels. You're never like, oh, that was a Ron Howard movie. But, if something's troubled, I feel like he kind of is the perfect guy to just bring the production into port and safely. And, so I understand why they did it, but I think he is part of the reason why the movie's kind of bland, I think. And it's interesting because I think Kathleen Kennedy's idea is basically to just pick super talented people, let them run amok in the Star Wars universe. And then when she sees the final product goes, oh, wait, we need to reel that in. We need to do this.
Yeah.
Which I think happened to Edwards from
Gareth
Rogue One.
Edwards.
That happened to Gareth Edwards. And they were able to fix it, I guess, through, it was probably like story issues or something like that, because I think they had a script doctor come in. But this, maybe the tone was off. Like, it's like, I heard the rumor that, they were turning Han Solo into Jim Carrey.
Ace Ventura.
Ace Ventura, right. And so you're like, whoa, that's not the type of movie that I think anybody wants for, a Star Wars movie. But I could also see them saying, go do your wacky thing. Go make Solo the Solo that you want to see. And then I also heard that Lawrence Kasdan was like, stick to the script. And there was so much improv because they were trying to, just spice it up and make it funny. So I see where that could have gone off the rails. And so the pendulum swings to, let's just bring it into port and make it as bland and as universally accepted as possible. And I think that's what happened.
Troy, do you have any opinion on Ron Howard? I know it's a hard director to have an opinion on, but do you have one?
Well, that's the same. I mean, I have heard all the anger towards, Ron Howard and why did they bring in, the guy, like all he's ever done science fiction was Cocoon. And
Cocoon's actually very good.
Yeah, looking at this from a studio standpoint, he was absolutely the right director to bring in because Disney, they made their gamble. They tried to bring in a visionary team, and I think that's great that they tried to do that. And they thought, well, let's try to make it a comedy. And I think everybody's kind of forgetting that, this is a giant budget film. And like Chris, what you were saying, they sort of let these visionary directors sort of have free reign and let them do what they wanted and pretty much let them almost complete this film. And at the very end, like when they were like 75% done shooting, they said, okay, we can't do this. So purely from a money angle and a studio angle to just not make this a tax write-off and close the doors, they had to have a movie that they could release that would appease everybody and have it work. So he's kind of the perfect director for that. And I also think it's kind of interesting. I mean, this is just anecdotal, but, he had worked with George Lucas he was directed by George Lucas and American Graffiti.
right.
So he knew, he had a relationship with him and kind of
and
knew
Willow.
what George Lucas
And Harrison Ford is in American
and
Graffiti.
Harrison Ford is there too. So
You guys are forgetting Willow. He directed Willow.
that's right.
And
That's right.
starring Warwick Davis, who was in this movie too.
Yep.
There you go.
So many connections.
Anyways, yeah, I think he did a great job to basically fix a ship that maybe it wasn't sinking. We'll never know what that original cut was, but it wasn't what the studio thought they were going to be able to make money on, and they needed something that was. If this is a fixer upper, he kind of knocked it out of the park.
Chris, what was your first, just brief initial feelings when you saw it the first time? How did you feel about it?
Honestly, when I came out, I mean, like, it leaves you with a good feeling because, everything kind of clicks into place. Like, they go into hyperdrive and you're like, yeah, man, I want to get into a hot rod and with a buddy and just go have some adventures. And so, like, I didn't hate it. I always wanted more Lando, and it was a perfectly fine Star Wars movie, and I felt fine about it. And it was only until, like, rewatching it now where it's just like, it comes to be like, it's pretty much my least, well, other than Last Jedi, it's my least favorite, of the sequels of the new era, of the Disney era.
Troy, when you finally got around to seeing it, how did you feel about it?
So as I mentioned before, I missed it in the movie theater and didn't get around to seeing it until well into the holiday season of 2018, when my family got together for Thanksgiving, and we had not really been speaking to each other after the election of 2016. So I thought, I'll go ahead and buy this movie on Blu-ray because it's the most inoffensive movie that I can think of that everybody could sit around and be just fine. And that it was. But during the screening, my mom was kind of having too much to drink, and then she started arguing with my sister, and then we all kind of stopped watching it, and everybody sort of left not talking to each other again. And then that was my first viewing experience. So I didn't actually get to finish it. I was kind of thinking that wasn't that bad. I kind of want to finish it. So I didn't get around to seeing it until the second time during coronavirus lockdown, like early in that first month.
Wait, what? You waited that entire time?
I waited that long, yeah. And then...
And your family got into an argument just because what? They hated... He didn't like... He doesn't sound like Harrison Ford, and they got into fight?
No, they started arguing over family stuff. My mom started ragging on my sister, and then she started crying, and so...
I don't mean to laugh. I'm sorry.
So Solo was supposed to be a buffer film to just have everybody sort of get along and basically not talk to each other. and it almost did that. It almost achieved that goal. But yeah, I didn't get around to seeing it again until lockdown, and I just needed something that I could glaze over, and it turned out to be the most perfect movie for that.
All right, well, so let's get into our viewing of Solo this time. We start with the whole setup in Corellia, and we get to see, Han's world and everything. I thought it was sort of interesting that the opening crawl isn't really a crawl, but because it's Star Wars, they've got to do some text in the beginning. And they set up like Corellia and the syndicates and hyperfuel and everything. You don't really need it, I don't think. Just start the movie.
No, the movie starts without any rhythm, or to me, it's pretty weak. And honestly, when I watched the trailer for Solo, I remember their music a little bit more like rock, like guitar music in the trailer, and I was like, oh, maybe they're actually going to go into a different place and maybe not be this orchestral thing. And I feel like that's also a big gripe of mine, is that they didn't really, make it a Han Solo feeling movie to me. It's just like he was, Star Wars is a Skywalker movie, and Han Solo lives in a different world to me where there's rock music and it's a little bit edgier and grimier. And I didn't get any of that from this movie.
I thought I might be alone on this. And I actually, this was kind of my big issue with the film is, although the stuff that we saw on Corellia, I know this film is fan service, but it definitely, most of the fan service seemed to be pushed in that first opening scene, those first opening scenes. But I don't think we needed Corellia at all. And I was trying to, and even when Emilia Clarke was introduced in that scene, she is not compelling in the slightest. And then I kept thinking, what if this movie actually started right when he's in the infantry, right
Sure.
there, and
Yeah.
that's where we see Solo, not having met this girl that he's, you know, this his childhood friend, love or whatever that he's. What if he's just a deserter that is a fuck up in the army that
Yeah.
just wants to get out?
Yeah.
I wouldn't miss anything.
And that's where, you know, that there's all kinds of things that could happen there. Like that's where he needs to learn to fly and he becomes a good pilot, not because that's the other problem on Corellia. Like we're sort of introduced that, you know, he wants to be a pilot. And the opening credits says like, on these mean streets, a young man fights for survival, but yearns to fly among the stars. It's just like, yuck.
Yeah.
You know?
Lame.
So I just kind of, this viewing of this film, I kept thinking, how much better it could be if you just cut that whole opening off, all the Corellia stuff.
I don't disagree with you, but I do think, thinking of what we've heard so much about Corellia, so I can see the thought of the screenwriters, well, we got to show Corellia, and then they're setting up a romance, so that's where you're going to set up the Emilia Clarke romance.
Yeah. But imagine her coming in after you've heard a little bit about her, and then she enters as like this femme fatale.
Right.
And he's like, you know, Kira, oh my God, you know, and then there's some lore to her and there's some mystery to her. I just think that it would actually make her more of a compelling character.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, her character is blah.
Well, not as blah as her take on Sarah Connor in the Terminator Genesis. She's better here than there.
Sure.
I don't think she's that bad. I agree she's not particularly compelling.
No, I don't think it's the actor's fault. I think it's just the writing. It's just the way she's introduced. I know that they're going for this Dickensian, you know, oh, he's a scrapper and they're all like living underground. I get all that, but it doesn't do anything for me. And I feel like that's my main issue with the movie is it's all fine, but it's just when you start thinking about it, you're like, it should be way better. Like, you know, like this should be kicking ass. Like, come on, we want better. And it's fine.
I actually, you know, as far as Emilia Clarke's performance, I remember the first time that I was watching this and my wife was just like, oh God, you know, she's awful. And, you know, it's like everybody loved her in Game of Thrones. And both of us were just like, what is wrong with this? And then I was looking at the bonus features and the behind the scenes interviews and stuff. And she's actually great. Like she's got this spunk and she's, you know, she's more animated in those interviews. And I just feel like I agree. Like it's the way her character's written. Like she's so stiff and uninteresting. And I don't think it's the fault of the of her talent. It's just that she was told to just sort of be pretty because she's this love interest and she's just a poorly written character.
Agreed.
In my mind.
I also think she was cast specifically because she's short and Alden Ehrenreich is clearly short.
Yeah.
And they're well matched in the height department. So there's the Lady Proxima scene. Shout out to Linda Hunt. She is the voice of Lady Proxima. And that's fun. That's a cool creature. You know, there's some fun jokes. And it's at this point in the movie, there's a whole thing where he's got the grenade and it's not really a grenade. He's faking out that he has a grenade. This whole scene felt so Marvel to me. And a lot of the movie feels Marvel to me. It feels like Ron Howard came in and they're trying to fix it. And they're like, let's just do what Marvel does. And it had that kind of rat-a-tat gag of like, where it's, you know, you don't really have what you say you have. Oh, yes, I do. And, you know, and it's that
is very thing. Han Solo, though, I would say. Like, you know, I think Marvel is taking that from Han Solo. So they originated it in a way.
I'm not even saying it's a criticism. I just felt it.
Right.
I think it was probably the right move. But, you know, I like the Lady Proxima creature. I think it's pretty cool. She's a big worm.
Yeah, it's like a female Jabba in a different way.
But then it goes into this speeder chase, which I thought was really lame, kind of. I mean, it's cool to see a speeder racing through this sort of industrial environment, but I didn't think as far as being an action sequence, I don't feel it didn't really get the blood pumping.
It also was coming. The speeder chase was the first thing you see, and that right away So there was these the logo was the first thing that didn't seem to fit.
Yeah.
Right? When you see Solo come on screen, it looks like it should be in Tron.
Yeah.
I didn't really get the sort of
Totally.
digital, like Star Wars is not digital.
Yes.
It's the opposite of digital.
Yeah.
It's analog. It's supposed to be.
I know exactly what you're talking about. The way it fades in or transitions onto the screen is so Tron Legacy and not.
Yeah, and it just did not fit the Star Wars universe at all. And then he's in the speeder chase, and you see him put the dice on the rear view mirror or whatever, and it was just like, oh man. So this is immediately fan service.
Oh, yeah.
And I agree. I just felt like that speeder chase just was in there because he's a pilot and we got to show him moving fast, but
It should be called Solo the Callback Story because that's all this movie is.
Honestly, I didn't even object to either the dice or the speeder chase in theory. I just objected to the fact that it wasn't shot particularly exciting. Give me a speeder chase, sure, but make it thrilling.
The gauntlet's been thrown down by like Fury Road, and then even Fast and Furious will give you a better chase, than that. Yeah. And the speeder bike chase in Return of the Jedi was great, for the time. And like Star Wars has not had a really, I'm trying to think of I guess the pod race maybe, but that's an element in Star Wars where you have like these badass thrilling chases, and this did not deliver.
Oh, I think the Millennium Falcon chase in Force Awakens,
sure, yeah, that's good.
In the junk field was pretty incredible.
Not land-bound though. I'm talking land-bound chase.
Well, speeder bikes and Return of the Jedi, wasn't that like the most? For a long time, that was the most famous chase scene.
I even like the Canto Bite chase scene through the casino with
Bite your tongue. Oh God.
I like that better than this speeder chase.
That's like the worse than the prequels.
Oh,
God,
I agree, Chris.
Anyway, let's not go there.
Yeah.
Well, we won't go down that road.
Oh, can we talk about like our first impressions of Han right away? Because I feel like he's, from the start. I mean, I know he's supposed to be younger, but it does feel like the actor's trying a little too hard. He's too excitable, whereas like Han Solo is always the chill one to Luke's excited energy. And maybe it's the right decision to have him evolve over the movie, but at the very beginning I just felt like he's not getting it, not 100%. Sometimes you're like, oh man, I can totally see it.
I like him overall. I agree there's moments where he doesn't quite feel right. I think that if he wasn't playing Han Solo, it would be a whole different story. I think he could totally be a compelling Star Wars character that wasn't named Han Solo.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think
I agree.
The Mandalorian is proving this, that you can just take the basic like idea of a character and make it into a new character, and then nobody's carrying the baggage along with it.
Right.
That's what Poe Dameron is. Right.
Exactly.
He's sort of Han Solo 2.0, and nobody has a problem with it. Exactly. I mean, I love it. I think you just recycle the initial archetypes and keep going.
Yeah, I think that it would have worked so much better if he had just been a new character that was basically Han Solo, but a younger guy, and we see how he becomes this sort of this embittered smuggler.
I feel like Han should be more irresponsible. Like, yeah, he's doing this booster, but I feel like he's just a wise Alec the whole time, and like the energy's not quite right for me.
We'd be remiss if we didn't touch upon the whole him getting his name Solo at the before joining the Empire. It's been covered to death in a million podcasts how stupid it is, so we don't have to linger on it. But it is pretty bad.
There's no reason for it at all.
I had no problem with it. I mean, it was an Ellis Island thing. I get it, but yeah, it didn't offend me.
This was a movie from like I mentioned. There's when he puts the dice on the mirror, and I feel like, okay, now we're going to get a lot of this in this movie. So I was kind of bracing for that stuff, but some of them hit harder than others. Every time you fetishize how he got, how Lando got his capes and how Han got his gun, and but it's not out of place, I guess, because that's what this movie is.
I just wanted to see why Han learned to love vests. I wanted to see where he got his penchant for vest wear.
Hell yeah. You should have a closet full of vests.
For the first time I saw it, Chris, I believe I saw it with you and maybe your second viewing. We saw it at the Lemleys in NoHo. And I just remember seeing it and just thinking, what's going on with I thought the projection was bad or something.
Yeah.
So this is the third time that I have put this in because I've only seen this on Blu-rays. So This is the third time I have seen this at home. Every single time I put it in, I stop it and put in another disc because I think there's something wrong with my player.
It's not calibrated right. Yeah.
It tricked me again this time as well. I did it again. I was like, that's just right. That's just.
It's
this
like
movie.
you've got sunglasses on. It's like it's so the mids are so dropped down. And honestly, I know I'm skipping ahead, but this is a big reason why I feel like a lot of people didn't like it, is because, you know, movies are supposed to be bright and like make you feel good about life, and it's so not that. Yeah.
Some people say they like it that way, but I swear to God, I had to crank up the backlight on the TV because I just could not see the detail, and the characters looked like silhouettes.
Yeah. But not even that. It's just murky, as opposed to, like, you know, The Godfather, where there's chiaroscuro, like, you know, hard contrast lighting. That's not what's happening. There's no contrast. There's no dimension to any of the cinematography. It's all just so flat.
I feel like when these DPs are shooting these things, and when they're in the color correction, they're on the best equipment, and they're thinking like, we're just going to make this as subtle and interesting as possible. And then on most people's televisions, all that information is going to get lost.
Right.
So I think it's a hazard when you are working on the best equipment and you're trying to bring it down and not have it so explosive and bloomy and contrasty. And these DPs kind of get too involved in the sort of shadows and stuff. That's just, you're going to lose it. You're going to lose that in home video. And in this case, they lost it in the theater.
Yeah.
You know?
All right. Well, speaking of murky gloominess, the next segment is the war that's taking place on the planet Mimban. I'm going to show my nerd card here. Mimban is the planet from the novel Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which was the unofficial sequel to Star Wars that was written when George didn't know there was going to for sure be a big budget sequel. And it was a book that came out in between Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. And in the book, Luke fights Darth Vader, the lightsaber battle, and on this swampy planet. But really kind of Empire erases that from history. So they used this as the planet.
Which battle? This is the first battle where he joins the infantry?
Yeah, when he's in the infantry and he's on the murky swamp planet, which is even murkier than the other stuff. I agree with you, Troy, that it probably would have been better if we just sort of started here. It kind of bugs me that he's ground infantry and not a pilot, but I guess...
But that's why I wanted to start there, and I started to go back to this again, but as I kept thinking of that, if you axe the opening, but that gives him a reason to want to be a pilot, right? And there's a deleted scene. Have you guys watched the deleted scenes where he crashes the TIE fighter? There's this pretty decent scene where he is actually piloting a TIE fighter and he crashes it, and then he has to go to a tribunal and explain what he did wrong. He does it because
he's a good guy and he wants to save people, as opposed to, like, doesn't it show that he's got a good streak, a moral streak?
Yeah, kind of. But I guess what I'm saying is, while he's in there, that's sort of the perfect reason to, or it's the perfect venue for him to have this desire to be a pilot, to get out of the army, to learn how to fly a plane. And instead of just this text in the beginning that says he yearns to fly through the stars, you know, it's just like, we just hear him say, like, I want to be the best pilot in the galaxy. Like, that's not interesting.
Yeah, no, if there had been a scene, if it had started, the whole movie had started with a scene where he's trying to pilot a TIE fighter and crashes it or whatever, and, you know, because he's trying to help people, that would have totally worked for me as an opening.
That would have been amazing, actually. And that's how Han Solo became the best pilot. You know, there's sort of like an action
right
there.
And then he's bumped down to ground infantry, and then it all makes sense. Well, so that's interesting. I had no idea that was a cut scene. Yeah,
it's weird that it was cut, because it, like I said, it sort of does the work, and it seems like it was written in there for that reason.
So we meet our crew here. Beckett, played by Woody Harrelson, Val, played by Tandy Newton, and Rio, an alien, played by Jon Favreau. I think they're a pretty good crew of smugglers. How did you guys feel about the crew?
I'll just say I loved this crew. and this goes back to why I think the movie should have sort of started here, is because he meets up with this crew and they're great. Like, this is kind of what I like in Star Wars, is when you get a ragtag team
Yeah.
like this, and all of them are great. I even like Rio.
I love Rio.
I think they're terrific, and they work well together. They look like they belong together. The cast is terrific. Woody Harrelson is killing it. Like, it's just, that feels like Star Wars. And then they're also, this team is taking it to the Western level, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but it's sort of, they're the perfect bridge between Star Wars and Western. And I feel like this, I want to be with these people. And the opening wasn't really doing that. So this is kind of where the film actually picks up.
I do get a little distracted by Woody's wig, but I do like him overall.
I kind of object in general to the idea of Han having a mentor, and so Beckett doesn't really do much for me. It just seems like it's Woody Harrelson doing Woody Harrelson, and he just said, I want to be in a Star Wars movie and get a paycheck, and he's just doing his thing. And Tandy, I feel like, is super underutilized. I thought her character was the most interesting. Rio was cool. I remember liking him, but then my wife Autumn was like, wait a minute, is he's just Rocket Raccoon? And I'm like, you're totally right. And then now that you're talking about, them just taking a page from the Marvel handbook, I'm like, yeah, he's pretty similar.
No, I object to that. I don't think that's fair comparison at all. Rocket Raccoon is way more acerbic and sort of a jerk. Rio just seems like he's got a little bit of an attitude, but most of the time I feel like he's kind of,
He's the gearhead.
Yeah.
That you need. That's, he's the guy that is constantly going under the hood and fixing this. He's the pilot.
I think he's nicer than Rocket Raccoon. He's
That's
not
true.
as much of a jerk. Beckett sells Han out, and then we get the big scene that we've all been waiting to see, where he's dumped into a muddy cell and we meet Chewbacca. This all tracks with the Han and Chewie mythos, if you know their sort of story, that, this is kind of how they met.
I don't know the mythos, so could you explain to us?
I heard it was different.
Well, I mean, I always heard that they met somewhere and Han saved him, basically. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just talking broad strokes. But that he was a prisoner somewhere, and he saved them both or whatever, and that's how they became friends.
Well, I remember hearing, like, I don't know where it came from. It came from my brother, who obviously either like read it at the time. This is on the time of the original trilogy, but I remember him telling me the tidbit about Chewie, Han working for the Empire, and then seeing all these Wookiees being tortured, probably on Kashyyyk or something, or enslaved, and him deciding to rescue Chewie, and then Chewie owing him a life debt.
Right.
And that was like the whole reason why he was following Han all around. But then I know that I think Lawrence Kasdan objected to that and said, no, Chewie is independent and he's not just doing this out of some like obligation to Han. He wanted to put them on equal footing. So I understand that, but I did want more of, that sort of more of an emotional moment where, you see that the Empire is really taking out the Wookiees and treating them poorly, and then Han, hard Han sort of has this breakdown of his usual operations and says, "Oh, I got to save this one Wookiee," and then that was how they started. Whereas now it's like they're both equally fucked, and no one saves the other. He kind of comes up with an idea and they get out together, which is okay. That's the equal footing thing. I get
an idea that I'm a little disappointed Chewie didn't think of on his own. Like, all he had to do is bash that support beam and it would all fall down.
Right. And Chewie's not dumb. Like, what the
But
hell?
I do, and this is one thing I caught on this viewing, which it never tracked with me before, but I really like the Imperials that are above there watching them fight, and one of them's like, kill him slower.
Oh, yeah, they're great.
Like,
kill him slow. That's
like,
good. Yeah.
I never caught that before. I'm like, that's kind of a good joke. And that brings me to the humor in this, which I think, like, the jokes in this work fine. None of the jokes are ever like gut-bustingly funny, but the jokes, I think, for the most part, work pretty well. The humor works pretty well in this movie.
That actually was one of the best ones. And I caught that this viewing too. It took me like third time around to to catch those guards up there, and that was
Well, I
hilarious.
feel like the humor in this movie kind of works that way in a lot of instances where when I initially saw it, I didn't even track the jokes. And then on repeat viewings, I was like, oh, there's like a little joke there. That's pretty good. And it's just the way it moves. You don't really notice them the first time, but I've kind of come to appreciate the humor in this overall.
Well, there's some that are overt.
Those ones aren't as good. It's the subtle ones that work better in this movie.
But there's nothing that where like you palm slap, your face. So which is very encouraging, and I feel like there's a weird line to not cross with Star Wars humor too. Like it can't be too modern. I feel like sometimes like I feel like maybe Lord and Miller went the improv route, and people were busting meme jokes or who knows what. But I feel like you need to keep it at a certain level where it's universal and not specifically of Earth,
Well, the phone call, I don't want to keep bringing it back to Last Jedi, but the phone call scene.
Exactly. That's a perfect example of where you're like, this is our world. This is not Star Wars.
Which phone call?
Exactly. Like, can you hear me now?
The beginning of Last Jedi when Poe is in the X-Wing and he's talking to Hux.
Yeah. But Last Jedi had one of, I think, my favorite Star Wars jokes.
Oh, yeah? Which one?
When Yoda says page turners, they were not.
But I've heard people that hate that joke too. They're like, that's too modern or whatever. I thought that joke was really funny. I remember chuckling out loud.
People still turn pages in Star Wars.
Sure, right. I don't know. Everybody's got their weird threshold for these things.
And Yoda's a joker. He's
always been funny.
Not like out of character.
Yeah.
So actually, speaking of jokes, one more reason I think that I liked Ron Howard coming to this project was because we got a cameo with Clint Howard.
Yes.
so that kind of makes it all worth it.
That's true. But Troy, to piggyback on what you were saying about like some of the good deleted scenes, I think around this time there's a snowball fight between Han and Chewie, which is actually like a warm, funny moment. That doesn't even
saw that today.
Take too long, and you're like, why didn't they put that in?
I disagree.
Well, I remember Sebastian saying, I forget if it was you, maybe it was Maddie, but like somebody said, the reason why they make Star Wars movies is just so we can hang out with people on the Millennium Falcon. And that kind of is, what the best parts of this movie should be, is just like being there with Han and Chewie and seeing their relationship grow and them be buddies together.
Actually, it could have worked. That deleted scene, it seemed kind of improvised. Like it was something they just thought up of on the spot.
Sure.
And they keep doing it for like 3 minutes, it seems like. They just keep throwing snowballs at each other. So it starts to feel a little embarrassing. But I think, if he tossed a snowball and then Chewbacca throws a snowball back, like that would be funny.
All right. So we meet our Chewbacca. You guys are, I'm assuming, fine with Chewbacca as played by Junis. What's his name? The new Chewie?
Chewie's fine. He's just fine. Like, I don't see how you could really mess up Chewie. How can you make that go wrong? He's just...
I feel like they messed up Chewie in Revenge of the Sith. He's in that for like half a second, and I'm like, that's not Chewie.
That's just dumb.
Yeah. I mean, this seems like the similar conversation to like, who's a better Jason Voorhees?
Right.
It's like a big, tall, lurking
Kane
figure.
Hodder is the only Jason Voorhees. He's the only man who can wear the mask. So, Han and Chewie get free. They join up with the crew and they accept them into their crew. And so we move on to the big sort of early second act set piece, which is the train heist sequence. This scene was really sold to us in the trailers. I remember there was a lot of, shots from this. I kind of, and this is a feeling that I have about the whole movie, is the planet settings that we get are fine, but they're not, there's no exciting planet.
There was a lot of snow.
Yeah, like snowy mountains, and then we get a beach and we get a muddy sort of planet, and none of it is super exciting. And like there's no planet where you're like, oh, we haven't seen this in Star Wars. And I know it's getting hard to do that at this point, and they have to sort of stick to like terrains that are terrestrial because that's what Star Wars does. But
I guess, even though I was saying I could do without the Corellia stuff, but I kind of liked that, sort of Detroit Star Wars
it's a
planet.
cool
Like,
setting.
that's cool.
Yeah, that worked.
But you didn't have to start there. We could have ended up there.
You didn't have to start there.
You could have ended up there somehow.
But the train heist,
Yeah, the physics of the train is cool. Like,
That's the best part of it.
Again, like this is a overt Western. Like this is a Western, and
Yes.
that you need a train heist.
Yeah.
This is right back to like Once Upon a Time in the West. This is classic Western stuff. So,
But wouldn't it have been cooler if it was like a space train heist and they had to
well, it
like
kind of is. I
sure,
mean,
yeah.
that's a model. The train on that rail going around these mountains, I thought was great. I agree with you.
it's cool, but why do they need a train in Star Wars? You know, like I get it, they're doing a Western and that's cool, but we're in a world where everybody's flying around on like land speeders. Like even the things that are low to the ground are like hovering off the ground. So you mean to tell me they've built a train track through some planet? Why would they
I
do
guess
that?
because a rumbling train, that's rattling on tracks is safer to carry coaxium.
Is that
Yeah,
is that
exactly.
was that really in the movie? No, right?
They're trying to steal coaxium and it's highly unstable. That's why it blows up at the end,
Yeah.
right? I mean, they
Right.
wanted that, and like it's just something on a train is less likely to hit something.
I don't want to make it sound like I'm totally down on the train. I think it is cool, and I do love the way they mess with the gravity and having it tilt and everything. There's a lot of tilting in this movie. Did you notice that? Like
Yeah.
the speeder tilts, this tilt.
I miss space though. You're right that like there isn't enough space in Star Wars anymore. Like, there's very few. Every time they do a new aerial battle, it's like it's in a planet's atmosphere.
Yeah.
Like, what happened to space? Like,
Yeah.
come on, like this could have easily been in space and it would have been pretty cool, I think.
I know I sound like I'm really dogging on it, but I kind of dug it. I dug it overall. Although again, I feel like it's totally a totally fine action sequence, but it's not. I find myself tuning out a little bit during it, especially in the beginning. Later on in it, it starts to get more interesting when Infest Nest shows up and
Yeah.
they're like, they're having to like throw like grappling hooks on it and stuff. But like there's this whole part in the beginning where they're sort of setting up how they're gonna rob the train and Tandy Newton's character is going to blow something up and stuff. And I kind of like every time I watch it for some reason, even though it's supposed to be this big, exciting sequence, I get a little.
I agree completely with you. I do like the idea of the train heist, and I thought that was pretty great that they did that. But I think Solo, the movie in general, suffers. It's got a problem with suspense.
Yeah.
Right. So the train, you just sort of show up and they're on the train, and it didn't like do the thing which Westerns do, where you sort of have the sort of traditional Hitchcock ticking time bomb, right? So
Yeah.
it didn't set that up very clearly. Like, if this goes wrong, then it's going to blow up. We didn't really see how that worked.
Yeah.
Exactly. We didn't see.
Yeah, it's just stock.
Yeah, just kind of like the action just sort of started and people were chasing each other around. And I feel like that's sort of an issue with the whole film. Like there's never that pressure moment of suspense.
Well, I think you're absolutely right about the suspense, and I also think it comes down to the actual sort of construction of the scenes isn't particularly exciting. And when I say that, I mean sort of the way the images and shots are sort of visually laid out. Like if you had been storyboarding it, Troy, this scene would have popped.
Yeah. It would have been a box. We wouldn't be doing this podcast because
Right.
it would have been a box office hit.
Boffo box office.
I think the biggest problem with Star Wars as of late is nobody gives a shit about like the mechanics of like the heist or the military aspects of like, oh, we're gonna go in and get this shield off for this. It just everyone, you can tell the screenwriters are like, oh, I dread writing this. What do we have to? Oh, we have to do something different. Put this thing over there that they have to blow up this time. I'm like, no, somebody should be honestly interested in making an interesting and exciting new way for these mechanics, these plot mechanics to work out. That way we're not just, this is the stock chase and yeah, they have to do this. So like, come
Right.
on, think of something cool. Have Tandy have to like spin down from the edge of the cliff and do a dive and then parachute down to turn this thing off, or just something else. It's just, all of it is stock, just like the way the Force Awakens, they blow up the Death Star. It's like, it's just the same shit. It's the same shit every time. And there's always this planning scene in Star Wars, which is now just a joke where they're like, what's the plan? We know this is ridiculous, but we just got to blow that thing up, and this guy's got to do that.
Right,
and,
but I think it's even more of a problem in this movie because so much of this movie is planning heists.
Yeah,
So
totally.
they
Yeah.
really needed to pay attention to that sort of. I get it when you're, heading into the third act of Force Awakens, you don't want to spend all this time describing how you're going to blow up the thing.
Yeah, but that's what makes Star Wars the original such a good movie, is that it's
Yeah.
all thought out very, very well, and like people don't give enough props to those story mechanics in that first movie, and just
Yeah.
it really shows that that's what made that movie so good.
That's what I was getting at with suspense. Is we were never there was never a clear explanation of the stakes.
Yeah.
That I mean, they kind of ran it by you really quickly, but I didn't. I feel like like you were saying, Seb, like as I was watching that train heist, it's like I kind of forgot why I was there after a while. I knew they were trying to steal coaxium,
Yeah.
and then these pirates showed up, the Marauders, but I didn't. Like there wasn't the plan that was laid out on a board at a table, like, okay, we got to get this, and if this goes wrong, then it's going to blow up and we're all going to die, and we only have this amount of time to do it.
This movie gets brought up a lot with these sort of things, but I recently rewatched the Soderbergh Ocean's 11, and that movie
Yeah.
does these kind of things so good because
Yeah.
they go through the whole heist and they're like, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. And the way he lays everything out is so super entertaining. And then he does like a twist on it where it's like, and
Yeah.
you've been watching it the whole time, and stuff like that. Like,
Totally.
I really feel like Steven Soderbergh, the way he lays these things out, like he really cares about that kind of thing. And there's always a thing. Oh, but this can go wrong. And you know what I mean? So I feel like when you have a movie about smugglers who are pulling off all these heists, and I even think it's worse in a later scene, like this sequence, I feel redeems itself as it goes on. But I feel like it's even kind of worse later on with some of these jobs. Like they're just not. They're not. It's like what you're saying, Chris. They're not laid out. We're not really. We don't have a really good explanation of what they need to do, how they need to do it, what are the dangers, what can go wrong, and then oh no, Infant's Nest shows up, and that's thrown a wrinkle they weren't expecting.
Right.
That's why I start to like it when Infant's Nest shows up because
Totally.
Infant's Nest has an awesome helmet, and I'm all about the helmets
Yeah.
in Star Wars.
And her theme is crazy, like that choir, that kids choir, like Akira sounding theme, and it almost threw me for a loop. I was like, "What is that supposed to be in the movie?" But it's so different.
I kind of wanted more of that character. I know it's the kind of character that doesn't really need to be in the movie a lot, but I just wanted more. And I feel like, Enfys Nest only shows up in this scene, and then at the end, like she should have been kind of like bugging them throughout the movie. I do like it once she, as we will learn, shows up.
For some reason, she totally reminded me of Beyond Thunderdome.
Yeah.
Like she just kind of had that look and feel, especially with the costume and stuff. She kind of like reminded me of who was the leader of the Lost Boys or whatever in the
I forget her
Thunderdome.
name. Here's my big problem with this whole sequence, and I don't know if it's really the fault of the finished movie, because I think that reshoots are to blame here, specifically with Val Tandy Newton's character, but we lose both Rio and Val in the sequence, and they're like the two characters that I like the most at this point, and we like just met them like 2 scenes ago. We've had one scene in between where they're at a campfire or whatever, and now we have this big action sequence, and now we're losing both of them. And
so was there some reason production-wise why her character got killed? Because it seemed like what happened? What is that?
She had to go back to Westworld, I think.
That's it?
So she had to be written out of the movie, basically.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think the screenwriter himself wrote on Twitter, he was like, "It's always a mistake to kill off Thandie Newton in your movie," or something like that.
Right.
And so he kind of admitted, like, and it's so sloppily done. She's just like, "It's been a ride, babe. Goodbye."
Yeah.
And like, come on, like somebody like that would not fight to the death. Like, she just blows herself up.
Yeah.
When there's like a million other options of like saving yourself, it feels so just screenwriter hand. Just
Well, not only that, but her death is not felt throughout the rest of the movie. It's like there's one sort of little bit where they make graves for them and Woody Harrelson's sort of kneeling at the graves, but then it's like after that he could give a fuck. Like he doesn't he doesn't make any, he doesn't like talk, you know what I mean? It doesn't change him at all. He's just like, all right, moving on.
Right.
It kind of made him seem like an asshole and less of a likable character just in that moment.
Right.
Like because in that, she died, and then we're supposed to understand that they had this tighter relationship than we were to believe at first. And then he's not broken up about it 10 minutes later. So that's interesting to hear that they wrote her out of the script, because it did feel weird.
If you're going to do that, then just take her out of the movie altogether, or get somebody else and reshoot it with a different actor, because you can't have the one that's what they did with the Dryden Voss character. He was originally played by Michael K. Williams, and he was apparently some sort of like, CGI alien or something, like a lion.
Oh, I wish I could have seen that. Yeah.
But they couldn't do that. So Ron Howard called up Paul Bettany. They should have just done that with the Val character, because, we've just gotten to know her. Then she dies. And then we're supposed to feel bad. We're supposed to be sad that she sacrificed herself, which we're not, because we just met her. It feels like a real dramatic waste.
Yeah, obviously Rio dies so that Han can
take
pilot.
Over. Right.
That makes sense. But yeah, Val, I will say the explosion is super cool, of the mountain, where I think they filmed it underwater. And so like the thing goes, it's like this underwater bubble that goes and then collapses. And that was a very cool, it's very hard to make a cool explosion these days. And that was a very cool idea, it's with CG involved.
It sounded like a really complicated effect. And it was like a combination of actual plates and a miniature mountain with you're right, and they exploded it in an aquarium.
Neat.
Underwater.
I did not
at high speed.
That's very cool.
I just want to pipe in about that it's dumb that Han and Chewie are involved at all in Beckett's the price on his head. You're like, why are they just run away? The Dryden Voss has no idea who you even are, Han and Chewie.
I didn't understand.
And then they even kind of say that they're just like, well, if it gets me back to Corellia, then I'm like, there's a million ways you can get back to Corellia. You don't have to go with this guy who's got a price on his head. And again, it's like one of those things where like the story mechanics, it's just not.
I think that it was, they were trying to set up the mentor, and so Han was sort of attracted to this group,
Yeah,
so
and again, I take issue with that. Han doesn't have a mentor. Experience is his mentor. I don't see Han having a mentor in my mind.
I don't have so much a problem with that as I just think he's being stupid. Beckett's basically telling him, I'm walking into a death trap and we've lost. That'd be like if you were like helping somebody steal money from a gangster, from like a mobster, and it all goes to shit. And the person you're working with was like, I'll take the heat for this. You can go. Are you going to be like, you know what? I'm going to go along with you. Like, you're going to be like, thanks, dude. Don't tell him my name.
Exactly.
Good luck. But, they're trying to set up that Han is a hero. It's just it doesn't feel heroic. It
goes
feels
against
stupid.
The Han that we're familiar with, who would never, who's always trying to get out of situations like that.
Okay, so we meet our main antagonist, Dryden Voss, who is some sort of higher up in the Crimson Dawn crime syndicate. He is played, as we said, by Paul Bettany. And we first see them through like a shot of their cool yacht ship, which I really dig this ship. This is the kind of thing that excites me when I see a Star Wars movie, to see something like it sort of it harkened back a little bit to the kind of Cloud City designs, but it's, this really long vertical ship, and they go in and there's this party going on, and this is how you do this kind of thing where I feel, and I'm sorry to bring up Last Jedi, but Canto Bight did wrong what this does right. Like, yes, exactly. there should be wealthy elite, that kind of thing going on, but I feel like this is just otherworldly enough that it, you get what it is, but you don't You're not like rolling your eyes like, oh, they're just doing Monte Carlo here and like
Yeah.
saying it's Star Wars, you know?
Yeah, Space Rihanna is awesome. I love the singing head. I mean, it's so
Is
entertaining and
that
like
Rihanna?
no, it's not really Rihanna. I'm just
Okay.
calling her Space Rihanna.
Right on.
The way it was introduced as well, like how are we gonna know what it looks like? And they just point. You see this thing emerging through the clouds over a mountain. Like
It's super cool.
it looks menacing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I really like this whole sort of sequence, and I love the ship, and I love once we're inside and the party and everything. And I think it's kind of another thing I appreciate about this is, you know, Kira comes back into the picture here, but I feel like it's kind of and I know they're sort of hearkening back to something like Casablanca or whatever, but I just think it's a cool way to reintroduce her character. Like she just shows up and behind him and is like taps him on the back. It's sort of, I don't know, it's sort of understated in a really nice way, and I like the way she sort of comes back into the story here.
Mm-hmm.
And then we meet, you know, Dryden Voss as played by Paul Bettany, and he's got this sort of I don't know, is it a visual effect or is it a makeup effect with the sort of red
I heard that
lines on his face?
it was added completely digitally later, but I don't know about that. So because his scars they change as his moods change.
Right, he gets
right?
angry
So-
and they sort of redden, which is you know, it's a nice effect. It looks cool and it's effective. You know, and then they introduce the cool daggers that are sort of like they're vibro blades or something, where they have really hot edges to them. I always like daggers and those kind of handheld weapons in movies. So
Oh, and when he's killing that guy, and then he's got this slave that's got half a head.
Yeah,
that's
that's
that
cool.
one of the coolest Star Wars. You know, we got
Yeah, Lobot, but a different one. Yeah, half Lobot.
yeah,
it was
Half head.
disturbing and great, and it was totally Star Wars, so it was perfect.
that was another one of those things that I didn't see until this viewing. I'm like, is there some sort of servants with half a head? And there's a few of them. You see them, more of them, in like they're the catering or whatever for the party. Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Sebastian, the
creepy.
daggers are very Dune, so I knew you'd like them.
Yeah, that's true. They are very Dune. You know, and I like the fact that we find out that Kira is basically his lieutenant. I think that's a, you know, a nice wrinkle. There's sort of a
Mhm.
sexual thing seemingly going on there, which they never lean into. I mean, Star Wars really never leans into sex in any way. But this, you get the feeling like, you
For
know,
sure. Yeah, something that bad happened to her. Yeah.
But going back to cutting out the Corellia stuff, what do you guys think if that was when we were first introduced to Kira in
I'm
that
fine
scene?
with it. Yeah.
I think
Like
it could
everybody's
work.
got history. Star Wars always
Yeah.
starts in media res, right?
Right.
We're like,
Yeah.
you don't want to ever. That's why, like, the idea of the origin story is kind of dumb. Like, you want to just be in the middle. Like, it's the
Like if
most
he bumped
interesting
into
part.
her and it'd be like, "Oh my God, it's Kira, it's you," you know, and then
That would have been fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that could have worked fine. But it's hard, you know, it's hard to say. It doesn't feel like, I will say this to your point. I feel like the Kira we meet here doesn't really resemble the Kira we met on Corellia, and I think that's the point. But if
Yeah.
Yeah.
if that's the point, then why did we need to see her in Corellia? You know what I mean?
that's my problem, right?
You don't really lose anything if you're losing a character that's not there anymore.
Yeah, the point was that she's supposed to have changed and she's conflicted,
Yeah.
you know, but I think her character throughout this movie is problematic. That's why I think I thought it'd be really interesting if she emerges as this femme fatale
Right.
at that moment.
Yeah, that would be the noir thing to do. It's funny though, this time when I was watching it, I really kind of I enjoyed their scenes together a little bit more. Like the first time I saw it, I was just like, oh, who cares about this? But this time it kind of worked for me in a weird way. I mean, I don't think it's brilliant or anything, but I could kind of, you know, they have that cute scene in the Falcon with the capes and stuff, and I don't know, it sort of worked for me in moments.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How did you guys feel about Paul Bettany as Dryden Voss? Do you feel he was a worthy villain for the movie?
Yeah. Oh, I thought he was great.
Yeah.
He's pretty cool. Yeah, he's menacing.
He seemed threatening.
Yeah.
I mean, I believed him definitely when he I mean, the way we're introduced to him with the servant with the half a head and he's killing somebody, it's that's how you introduce a villain. So it
Right.
was perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So we learned that they've got to pull off another job. Basically, they got to steal more coaxium to make it up to Dryden. Kira's going to go along with them, but they need a ship that's going to do it. So what ship do you think they're going to get? The Millennium Falcon, of course. But Lando Calrissian owns it, so they got to go to, I don't know what planet this is, but they go to basically hook up with Lando.
I don't know what planet that was, but that building
Mm-hmm.
that we see him in.
Yeah,
Did you
cool.
guys? I just noticed it this time. It was like it looked like a clipper ship that was sort of merged into the mountain and the ice.
Mm.
Mhm.
I'm not quite sure. I don't really know what place that was, but the building looked cool.
The planets definitely sort of I never really catch their names in the movie. They sort of fly by a little too fast. But and I don't. Do they give you titles as to the planets?
No, that's only Rogue One. I don't think they did it here.
Okay.
Whereas Rogue One, though, it was like every 5 minutes there was another planet with a name, and it almost got to be too much. So
Right.
I see why they don't do it.
Yeah, I would have liked to known where this was, but
Well, do your diligent homework, dude. Come on, are you
Oh,
a Star Wars
come on.
fan or
I
what?
can't- I can't be
You knew
bothered.
the other planet. You knew the mud planet.
I'm trying to do a podcast
Like
here.
what you were saying before, Seb. It wasn't any different from the other snowy place
Right.
that we'd already been on.
It was just
So-
that's another problem is like
Yeah.
even when the movies have planets that I don't catch the name, it's like, well, there's desert world and then there's
Yeah.
jungle
There has
world
to be one
and then there's
element, unique element. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, like in the in the new in Rise of Skywalker, they jump around to like a gazillion planets, but I always sort of caught where they were. Like I
Mhm.
just caught it better. Where here, there's not enough to sort of distinguish them. So it's not that I'm lost. I know they're on another planet. I don't need to know or whatever, but it's fun to get the name and for it to.
But also the
register.
design of each environment was. It seemed like it was icy, snowy,
Yeah.
with lots of clouds.
Yeah.
Everywhere they went, there was like lots of clouds.
Yeah.
And murky.
Lots of obscuring.
It just seemed like autumn and winter through the whole movie until they got to the refinery.
So we get Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian.
Yeah.
Now, most people feel that he is the highlight of this movie.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I
Totally
don't
agree.
disagree. He is definitely doing an impression, but this is one of those instances where I feel like the impression really works.
Mhm.
He clearly studied the Billy D. Williams mannerisms and stuff, but he's rocking it for sure.
But
Mhm.
he's adding his own thing, and
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
what I think you should be doing when you are using a different actor
Yeah.
Right.
to play an iconic character.
Yeah.
Is go ahead and
That's what
just
Ewan did.
just take it the way you want to go. Don't try to mimic. I felt like I was watching Donald Glover, and I didn't really get hung up on that. I have to try to think this is Lando.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a kind of a new character, which is great.
Yeah, but I did feel he was he was doing more of an impression than Alden was doing of Harrison Ford. But he had a balance to it where I do agree he was adding Donald Glover to it. It was like he took the baseline of Billy
Yeah.
D. Williams, just the way he phrases things, because that's kind of
Yes.
that's so much part of it, the way he talks. That way he kind of
Right.
you know what I mean?
Well, that's what Ewan McGregor did with Alec Guinness.
Right.
They basically take the mannerisms and then add their own sort of personality and fill out the rest.
Right. They layer themselves on top of it.
And the joke about the pronunciation of
Han,
was
Han.
that was a
Love
good
it.
that was a
Yeah.
good joke.
Good joke.
George Lucas says Han.
Does he?
Yeah.
So we get the Sabak game. There's a good sort of cantina vibe here where we get these sort of, all these different alien players. The design there was all pretty good, I thought. I definitely don't understand Sabak or how it's played.
Apparently, it's a real card. It's a real card game. Apparently, I think they developed it for the movie.
in the
yeah.
Star Wars universe.
Yeah, you can at
It's-
Galaxy's Edge. I think you can buy like a pack of Sabak cards, and there's the instructions about how to play it.
I'm sure you can.
Of course you can.
I just don't get it in the movie. I don't really understand. I mean, it just seems like poker or something.
Yeah,
But I don't think you you just need to look at it as poker.
Right.
Yeah.
Like there's no reason to have it explained to us. It's like the chess game on the board. I don't need to know how that works on the Millennium Falcon.
If I'm being honest, I don't know how any game really works in any movie unless I know how to play the game, and I don't ever pay attention to it. But I was just wondering if you guys knew.
Yeah. Do you know Spock's 3-dimensional chess? I don't want to know how that works.
I want to know how it works. So yeah, I mean, we get the sort of fake out where they have their card game, and we think this is going to be the game where Han wins the Millennium Falcon, but no, he loses the game. But they still manage to convince Lando to go along with the job. There's some fun back and forth with Beckett and Lando.
No, I hate that scene. Like, what leverage does Beckett have on Lando? They need his ship. He should be like 15%. No, fuck you. Go find another ship. Like, it pisses me off every time Lando gets like bullied by Beckett. I'm pissed off, and I'm just like, Lando should tell this guy to fuck off. And
Yeah, but
anyway,
no, hold on a second.
but I get it. Lando's like always like has castles built on sand, and so circumstances change, and I do like that where he's like running away from stuff, and he's always got to get a new ride or something.
Well, but that's how criminal enterprises work. Somebody comes to the bunch of people with the job, and the person who's putting together the job always gets the lion's share. All Lando's doing is basically being the driver. So it's not that crazy that he's not like offering Lando more.
There was something confusing about this moment here. Back to the Sabacc game right before this, though, is that Han lied about him having a ship,
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So then when they play Sabacc again at the end of the movie, and he bets on the Millennium Falcon and wins it, and Lando says,
Good
like,
point. Yeah.
fair and square, but it was not fair and square at all.
Yeah, where's my ship from before?
Right?
Yeah.
And it just seemed like that. I don't know. I got hung up on that. Did anybody else?
No, now that you're saying it does make sense. And I think I was hung up for it on 2 seconds. And I was like, where is he going to get this ship? And then he's like, it's in the shop. But you're right. You're absolutely right.
But he never called him on it. He's like, wait a minute, you owe me a ship.
Right.
Totally.
Like, why should I give you my Millennium Falcon?
Totally,
'Cause
exactly.
What happened to the ship I won?
Everyone keeps fucking Lando over.
Yeah, it's true. So, we get Lando on this job. This is also where we meet Phoebe Waller-Bridge as L3.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. So this Phoebe Waller coming in here, I didn't realize that was her the first time I watched this. And
I didn't know who she was the first time I watched this.
I love Fleabag. So when I found out that was her, and not only was it her doing the voice, but she like dressed up in this suit and played. You're actually watching her.
Wow.
And then they erased the rest of her except for like the helmet and the chest and stuff. So it's also her performance.
I didn't know that.
She wore like a green screen. And some of it was like motion capture, but most of it was she was basically wearing this exoskeleton of the costume, and then walking, and she looks ridiculous. She's like this, green screen leotard walking around with this giant helmet. But that's her that you're watching.
That's awesome. I did not know that.
And then they removed all of her body and then put wires in there and stuff. So when I found that out, it breathed new life into the film for me because I love her, and I didn't realize that was her when the first time I was watching this. So
I like that she snuck in a clit joke.
Did she?
Yeah, she was like, I'm gonna flip your switch, and she goes, "Good luck finding it."
Oh, right. That brings me to the whole sort of sex angle that the character has with Lando. How do you guys feel about that? That weird sort of insinuation.
Once I found out it was Phoebe Waller, I didn't mind at all.
You're like, okay, it's okay that Lando and her are getting it on.
I think it's
with a robot.
It's pretty funny. I like, and Lando's a freak, man. Like Lando's down for anything, and so I was into it. And honestly, it gives a little bit more. We'll get into it now. So. Adds a little bit more to their relationship, and also his relationship with the Falcon, because she ends up in the Falcon. And honestly, with Rise of Skywalker, I wanted just a little hint of a through line there. If he could have just like touched the Falcon and said "baby" or something, you know what I mean? Like that would have been like just a little bit of like, oh, all right, this is all tracking. But
it did kind of bring up that we have this universe filled with droids, and maybe some people are using these droids for a little bit more than they should be.
Yeah. One thing that sort of bothered me upon first viewing about the characters, the whole droid rights thing. Like, I think it's a cool idea then that there's a droid that's trying to liberate other droids, but they kind of really lean into it a lot. It gets a little one note for me. Like,
Yeah.
it's a thing that works, but they work it too hard, you know, like
Yeah.
It's a joke that's and it's a good, like you said, it's not just a joke, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
It's an interesting concept, but it's played out way too
yeah,
hard.
they hit it one too many times.
I have a niece who saw this and thought it was just a little too trite too. You know, you can't be like making this joke about droids' rights and then equating it to, women's rights. And then
Right.
it's one way of looking at it too, is that, oh, it's just a joke in this movie, but it's not really a joke in real life either. So
I feel like if they didn't lay into it so hard, they could get away with it
yeah,
just being a
exactly.
joke.
It also made it really comical instead of, it never seemed like she was actually really pissed about this. It was the whole thing was kind of almost like a screwball comedy
Yeah.
kind of way. Like, let's just make everybody crazy, and we have a
Right.
droid dancing around, and we have, them, you're free now, go, I don't care what you do, go free other droids. And
Right.
it seemed like maybe there was a lot of improv going
Yeah.
on that they thought was great, and they just kept using that material.
We get to see the Falcon in an earlier iteration, which is kind of cool. It's is it the escape pod that is gone
Yes.
from it later? That sort of chunk of the front of it is there in this version.
The mandible notch.
The mandible notch,
Which is,
yes.
I kind of think that's cool when there's no reason for it, but
Yeah, it's cool.
you have these strange designs that they did early on, and the Millennium Falcon looks weird to begin with, so just play with it.
And I think it fits Lando's character too, that it's all like fancy and fixed up and has a bar. And then you see once Han gets a hold of it, it turns into a trash dump, And so you're like, that totally fits.
Trashes it.
It fits with their personalities. So they did a good job with that.
It's funny how like the whole fan service things works, where you bristle against some of it, but then some of it you really like, I guess it's just a matter of how it's done.
In A New Hope, he goes like, oh, one of the escape pods has been jettisoned. And then so that's where it went. I just put that together. Sorry.
Oh, see, that's cool. It is kind of a little bit of a bummer that we've already been back in the Falcon. I feel that, I just feel like the way The Force Awakens reintroduced the Falcon, I thought was perfect. And then you get the scene where Han and Chewie come in, and it's perfect. So it's kind of a bummer for this movie, because by this time we've been back in the Falcon. And it's in Last Jedi too. So it doesn't really feel that special. And they're kind of trying to make it feel special. Like, hey, we're in the Falcon. It's like, we're always in the Falcon. Like,
I thought once you're in it and you see the clean, brand spanking new version of the Falcon was really cool. But there's this kind of fetishizing, when he says, this is the ship, and the music swells and the theme music starts, and they walk around the corner and it's like backlit. And that sort of like,
that's basically what I'm saying. It's just not that special,
Yeah.
The moments that work for me are when Han finally sits in the pilot seat and Chewie finally sits in the co-pilot seat. That to me had more of that feeling like, oh, it's finally happening. Everything's in its right place. Whereas, they were trying a little too hard to be like, oh, it's the Millennium Falcon, yay! And when it's exactly almost the same scene as The Force Awakens.
Did you feel that way when Chewie and Beckett are playing with the chess game? Did you feel that same way?
I'm very over the chess game at this point. I'm like, come on, guys! Like,
I liked that scene. That was another funny joke. It was an opportunity to throw a joke in there when he tries to smash the holograms, and
it's cute fan service.
They make Chewie so dumb. It's like, no, Chewie knows they're freaking holograms. Come on, like,
I like the way you're really defensive about.
I really don't like Beckett. Yeah,
but Chris, you just said Star Wars is hanging out on the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah, they're hanging out. It's cool, but like, don't treat Chewie like that.
Chris is really defensive about the OT characters, like treating Lando bad,
exactly.
treating Chewie bad. Really defensive about them. He doesn't like these new characters, giving them a hard time.
Yeah.
I enjoy the Kira trying on Lando's capes. I know it's a sort of cheap joke, but I thought it was a cute scene.
Great. Come on.
And it was a
It's
good
cute.
setting for them to have a little bit of a romantic scene, which I actually kind of liked. Like
Mhm.
this is the moment I was talking about where I sort of felt like this chemistry kind of works, you know.
Mhm.
It's not like a total bust chemistry wise. It's not
Yeah,
like
yeah.
out of the park, but it's not terrible.
It's not Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman bust.
So then we move on to the mining job. And like honestly, I barely remembered this scene from originally seeing it. I every time it comes up in the movie, like I completely forget about it. Like I'm like, they're like, now we've got to go get the coaxium. I'm like, wait, when did they go get coaxium? And then I'm like, oh right, that mining scene that I never
I just
remember.
watched this again last night, and please explain the scene to me because it's already slipped
and
me. Like,
the thing that's so terrible about it is that it's the crux of the movie. Like
Yeah.
this is the whole thing they're trying to do.
Again, this film has a suspense problem and a pacing problem, and at this point you're fatigued. It's also way too long.
Yeah.
We can't tell what planet we're on, and the jobs are, they're heists, but they're not set up. Like, it's not like, okay, heist number 2.
Right.
This time the stakes are higher.
Right.
Like, we just don't get that. It's just
No.
another job.
Yeah. No.
So that's why it's totally forgettable, because we're just running along with these people with doing work. They're just doing work.
Well, and not only that, but so it's this big heist that's the whole crux of the movie, that they've got to get this coaxium. To Chris's point earlier, and to both of your points, it's just so lazily written because it's basically just the Death Star plan. Mining, there's a mining facility that's got this raw coaxium that they need. And so they set up this fake like prisoner thing with Chewie, just like they did in the Death Star. Like, which I don't even understand, because why do they need to bring a prisoner into the mining facility?
Yeah, I never understood any
because
of this stuff.
they're working the Wookiees to mine
Right, yeah,
the
we
stuff.
find out that there are Wookiees in there.
But I guess the crux of it is the timing, is that they have to make the Kessel Run before the coaxium explodes. That's the only little sort
right, but
of
that's later.
spice added later. Yes, exactly.
Right, but I'm talking about this whole, and this is like 10 minutes.
Yeah, there's not, the Empire isn't like, holding the mine or anything like that. There's no special like thing that's stopping them from just going in there and blowing everyone away and getting it.
Well, it should be like a really secure facility
Right.
with all, there should be
There's
all
no
these
heist.
things that they have to overcome.
Yeah.
And they just kind of do the lazy, like, let's just do the Death Star thing where one of us is a prisoner and we go in, but then we it's the same thing.
And it's convoluted. So this is like there are way too many things. They all split apart, and way too many things go on with their individual characters, and we forget the plan, because right, this is where L3 does the revolution, and then Chewie finds his Wookiee friends.
So they
and
have
it
a
just seems
revolution?
so scattered.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
it's just, what was the plan originally? And they seem confused.
Yeah.
They're like, wait, who? What? Chewie's? No, he's not with us anymore. What? Yeah, he had something else he had to do. Like, as a viewer, I'm lost in here. I'm totally lost.
That little part is so weird when they're like, where's Chewie? And he's like, oh, he had something else to do. And they're like, well, is he coming back? And he's like, I don't know. Like, what? Like,
yeah. And then he does come back, but it just feels like kids going out to party, and then there's like, there's another party at this other house, and so they went there, and pretty soon you forgot the original plan for that night.
yeah, I'm not sold on Beckett's skill set here. Like, he's clear. I don't know how he's gotten as far as he has with these sort of ramshackle plans. I mean, and he doesn't even seem to be leading the crew at this point. He's wearing the Jabba's palace armor.
Yeah, the callback outfit. Yeah.
Right, which I guess, I don't know. For some reason that one kind of bugged me. I'm like, I don't know. I guess
Totally.
it shouldn't have bugged me. Why did it bug me? I don't know.
It's
did.
just
That
one
was-
too many. It's a bridge too far. You're like, come on, really? Like, come up with something new. Like,
Well, it just wasn't clear, and it wasn't concise, and there wasn't a very simple, like you said, that, what you were saying earlier, Chris, is like, you draw a grid. Here's how we do it. We need this one thing, and that's how you blow it up. okay, everybody, let's do this. And it wasn't clear where they were supposed to get this, how they were going to get back on the ship.
Also,
It was ramshackle.
Woody Harrelson looks goofy as hell in that outfit too. That's probably part of the problem.
Yeah, it's not really working for him.
What about the hairless Wookiees?
Yeah.
And then also what you were saying, Seb, is the design of the environments and what planet you're on. I couldn't tell you what that place was.
The design's pretty cool. I mean, like, all that.
There was an entrance, but I don't remember it, honestly.
I think the design of the actual like floor of the planet was cool with these like green steam baths and yellow rocks. Like that is kind of cool, but like once they get in the mine, it's a little, whatever.
There's an element to it that makes it feel a little cheap for a Star Wars movie. You know what I mean? Because now they're just in these sort of tight, like dimly lit corridors with
a lot of video cams.
Right.
Like we're seeing the action through a lot of security camera footage.
There's something about it that just seems like, and it's probably because of the reshoots that they had to not do things as expensively, but it feels just a little cheap. Like now we're in tight corridors.
Not everything can be the Imperial Resort and Spa on Scarif, I mean, like this is a mine where like they're making as much room as there needs to be, so I get it.
Right. Yeah. It's more, I object less to the setting than I do the fact that this whole scene just becomes a mess. It feels like a mess. And the fact that it's in this sort of tight, murky environment doesn't help. You can't really follow what's going on. There are some, it's nice that Chewie frees the Wookiees. That's nice. And, L3's freeing the droids, so it's like everybody's getting freed. That's nice, I guess. But it's like that's the only sort of emotional thing they have to sort of carry you through this whole sequence. Like I don't care about Han getting the coaxium. I barely even remember how he gets it. What does he do? He just finds a cart of it or something.
I think he just starts loading it.
That's why when they cut back to Lando and he's like telling a story, you're like, I want more of this. You know what I mean? Like even he's still like doing his entry in his ship log. And I will say though, like once they finally get out of the mine and there is that moment where Lando chucks the gun and then Han catches it, that's the type of cool swashbuckling, like no siege. I mean, it looked like a legit throw. Maybe he did catch it. That's the type of Western fun action that I feel like this needed more of. And just them being buddies,
structurally, like when you have a heist like this and you plan out the layout, I get when you're saying this is a repeat of the Death Star had the broken bridge, it had these settings where there was places where they were caught and they had to try to figure their way out. And there was setups for action. Yeah. And I never felt like there was any of that here.
Right. I have no understanding of the geography of this mine. And like they could have had it there. They had to go over like a pit or something. There was nothing in it that made you remember
it's stock,
what was going on.
And even in Rogue One, there was the giant tower of the hard drives or whatever.
I totally remember all of that sequence. That stuff's great in Rogue One. I love that. Like, I love a good set in Star Wars. And I just feel like this set is just lame.
It's not just that it was a lame set. It's just, it didn't seem like a planned layout for an action sequence. It just
seems like they set up a bunch of corridor tunnels and like ran around in it and blew stuff up and shot lasers.
Yeah. Right. And then to your point about the Death Star, I mean, they were improvising that plan because they got sucked into the Death Star. And so they're like, well, what the fuck do we do now? Let's do this. Whereas you guys had time to plan this. Like they talked about having a plan and it just goes nowhere.
It gets a little emotional at the end with L3 getting shot and dying.
A pretty good death sequence from a droid.
Yeah. It's not hitting me like I wish it would because I don't feel like I've gotten to know L3 that well. But I like that Lando's broken up about it. So it's a nice emotional button to the whole scene. It's definitely the thing that I take away most from it. But from here, we get the infamous Kessel Run. This is basically the only thing that anybody expecting to see a Solo movie is expecting to see, right? I mean, this is the thing.
Yeah. This is you kind of have to do this scene. And there's a reason why it's left for the very end.
Right. And I remember a lot of people when this was announced complaining like, "Oh, I know we're going to get the Kessel Run," but it's like, well, of course you're going to get the Kessel Run. That's
It's called
right.
Solo.
That's the only thing we know about it, that he's done. Now the Kessel Run takes place in this sort of space storm called the Maelstrom, which
Maelstrom. We've seen maelstroms before.
we have.
Not in Star Wars, but in Star Trek.
That doesn't count.
No, that's not a.
I'm talking about Star Wars
Well, I don't
Maelstroms.
even know what. All right, so we've never seen that in a Star Wars film. It kind of reminded me of like Flash Gordon. It seems like there's cloudy space stuff that we've been through.
We have
before.
seen cloudy space environments, definitely.
Yes.
They go into the Maelstrom and they run afoul of some Imperials, which it's a nice little sort of gatekeeper moment, but I'm not really sure why the Imperials would give a shit about them, but whatever, it's fine. So they have to go on, race through the Maelstrom. At moments I felt like it was kind of a little bit hearkening back to the meteor chase in Empire.
Oh, there's even the theme music in there.
Yeah, they recycle the music, and it's hitting that Pavlovian response. You're like, yes, it's great.
Yeah, there's the asteroid. What it's called, like hyperspace or something. I know that because my son is now listening to all the Star Wars theme music. So I'm like super familiar with The Empire Strikes Back.
And you know what sort of occurred to me? Well, because it did that, because it was reminding me of the asteroid chase, it also really hit me how much I miss model work.
Yeah.
And, like that asteroid chase in Empire when I was a kid, I thought it was like the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. Like I remember just being
it's still great.
Blown away that there's a spaceship zipping in and out of these.
It still is fantastic. It totally holds up. Yeah.
And there's a real tangible quality to the asteroids in that where you're like, oh, they're going to get hit. Oh no. And then they just barely, it's just thrilling. Whereas this, it's just a bunch of like CG.
Yep.
I agree. I did like one of the most memorable parts of that was his landing gear trick that he did,
cool.
which like sent debris into the other ships and sort of rained rocks into their windshields and stuff. But other than that, I agree with you. It didn't have that well-lit model of like real asteroids, objects being thrown around and smashing into these other
It
models.
wasn't bad. It's just in comparison to that scene in Empire, which they're deliberately invoking, it comes up short. It's not as thrilling. It's not as fun. But I did enjoy when Han says, I've got a really good feeling about this. I thought it was a charming reversal of the famous line, Then, we get the whole thing with L3's brain going into the ship. And look, I am always for an artificial consciousness, like a sentient consciousness being put into something. I've got a real hard on for that kind of thing. I guess my problem with this is not the idea that L3's in here, but that they're setting up something that they can't pay off because the original movies never mention anything like this. It's like they're setting up something,
especially with Han was right there when it happened.
Like, how come he's never been like, L3, help us out here or something? You know what I mean? Like,
and also Lando would be pretty hard up on getting rid of that ship if he was basically fucking this thing.
Yeah.
Why would he just give it away in a bet?
It's a weird thing to put in there just because just by virtue of being a prequel, this is not in the later movies. And so,
that being said, I think it's a pretty interesting idea.
I'm not sure how much of the consciousness is there, but so much as her navigational maps went in there. But then there's also the idea, like maybe that is why the Millennium Falcon is so cranky, is because L3 is like the spirit of L3 is making it, is always pissed off. And
it's a cool
And then
idea.
there is a point where C-3PO in Empire Strikes Back says, I don't know where your ship learned to communicate, but it has a weird dialect, and it's basically the Millennium Falcon is sassing C-3PO the whole time because it's L3. And then so there's a little bit of that connection there. I think that's what they're connecting to.
You're selling me more on this.
There you
go. Another thing that I really enjoy are giant squids. and we get a giant space squid in there, which I'm not going to object to in theory. I am a little kind of wondering, like, where's this thing coming from?
Yeah.
They're
Where does it
there's a
live?
like
Yeah.
well, there's like a planet or something that's falling apart that a lot gets confusing here, and maybe you guys can kind of help me out. By virtue of it, we got a black hole here, we've got a giant squid here. I like black holes, I like giant squids. So like just on a pure base, like I'm staring at the movie with a thin rivulet of drool coming out my mouth, like I'm totally enjoying it. But
Well, I think, again, like you mentioned before, this is basically the same scene as the asteroid belt
right.
before, and they escaped, a giant
Yeah, but that
worm
made
there
sense
too.
because it was
And
in an asteroid and it came
yeah.
out. Whereas this is like, where's this? Was this squid just the space squid just flying around and got sucked into the vortex by the black hole, or did it come from a planet? I just don't understand.
These kinds of things, I don't get as hung up on that stuff when it's in space. And maybe that's why I don't like you, Chris, you were saying you wanted more space stuff before.
But
I
this
kind of
doesn't
like
feel like space. I think that's the problem that Sebastian's like getting at, is that it's a whole bunch of imagery that's just thrown at you, and it's like doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like they're actually going through anything that's really in existence. I don't know.
This feels like space as defined by the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, not a space as defined by Star Wars. Star Wars, for all its fantasy elements, when you got into space, like it kind of, he was going for like 2001 kind of thing, not in terms of the ships or any of the physics or anything, but like once you were in space, there weren't just like monsters flying around, you know what I mean? Like, whereas in Guardians of the Galaxy, like I can totally see that happening there. You know what I mean? Like,
I see your point. Yeah. And it does seem a little silly, but it was cool to see the skin sort of sucked off of it.
No, taken just as it's happening in the movie, I have no problem with it.
Yeah.
It's just that like this time when I was watching it, I'm like, does this really make sense for Star Wars?
It doesn't.
I mean, this is the Kessel Run, right? It's supposed to be very difficult. So is this what they're saying, is that like all this crazy shit is what it takes to get through it, right? I mean, it still feels too mashed together for me. But
the scene it's suffering a layout plan. I don't know what the Kessel Run is.
No.
Because there's like like you're saying, Seb, but there's a vortex and a monster and a black hole.
Right.
I don't understand what the run is.
When Han Solo said that in Star Wars, were you thinking, oh, he probably had to race past a giant squid and and not get sucked into a black hole? And like, was that what you were imagining? I just thought it was like
it was a race, right?
Yeah,
it was like
some kind of like speed test. Yeah. But it's really in the end it's disappointing because we're not like, oh man, the Kessel Run, imagine doing that. It's really doesn't live up to anything. You're just like, it's a shit show in space that, I don't know, doesn't really add up too much to me.
And like you're saying, it kind of goes back to the root problem of this movie, which feels like these things weren't very well designed.
They're not set up properly.
I did notice how everyone has to have a say in the, coaxium boost plan, and Han goes, we can't get out to this. And then Kira says, well, we have coaxium aboard. And then Lando has to say, well, if there's a little bit of drop, and then Beckett's, it's like every single character has to have their little idea moment. And then, and then they get out of it, which almost feels like that's probably how the movie was made. Like, how about this? No, do that. How about this? No, you do that.
Well, I was going to say that kind of fuzzy logic in Star Wars is the kind of stuff I really like. Where it's like
I'm not complaining.
We could light speed skip or something. I kind of love that stuff when they come up with like a Star Wars solution to make the engines run faster. That's when I think Star Wars is working. Bypass the hyperdrive or.
So we're basically like rolling into our climax here. We're back on some sort of beach planet. Again, I don't know what this planet is. Like, I literally don't even think they say it.
Where the refinery is?
The refinery, is that what it is?
Yeah, it's where they're going to refine the coaxium. And Troy
because it's unrefined
Troy, with your
coaxium.
point of like lopping off the top half of the movie, I think this is where the movie should have ended, with like the Beckett and Han confrontation right here. I feel like you were saying it's way overly long. I feel like after the Kessel run,
Well, it's way too long. Like at this point, I'm exhausted.
let's just have it over already. Yeah, let's just have the Beckett confrontation.
Deal with the Marauders and their plight.
Yeah.
It's over.
You know, we suddenly have to care about a whole other interest group. You know, it's and at this point, right, I'm fatigued. I don't want to know about another rebellion that I have to get involved with.
And to kind of make matters a little worse, we lose Lando here, which seems like, why isn't he in the climax? He just basically like flies off.
It is funny when he flies
away.
off, though. I feel
It's
like
funny.
that was
It's a good joke,
yeah.
but I feel like they could have had him come back. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
or something. Like you could still do the joke and not lose him from the climax altogether. But who knows what sort of behind the scenes shenanigans were going on there. This is the part where Kira basically lets the air out of Han's sails by telling him he's the good guy.
Right.
And I really like this. This is like, it's this moment where I feel like they basically, even though we're kind of picking this apart, it basically hits the marks. You know what I mean? Like,
And I think Han, the actor, really starts to hit his stride here. I feel like in these, once they hit the refinery, I feel like all his acting kind of worked for me. I don't know if it's because I'm got used to him, but I feel like he's more laid back, and he's become more like the Han that we know at this point, and I'm accepting him more.
but I just love that point of that, you know, you are a good guy. You're trying so hard to be this sort of gray moral character, but really you're not. Really you're a hero, and you just need to admit it to yourself. And I think that's a really good that's the right story beat for a Han Solo prequel.
And I did love him bragging and upgrading the parsecs, you know, or like, what is it? What he rounding down, right? That was,
rounding down.
That's pretty great. Like,
yeah, and so Enfys Nest shows up and reveals that she's this sort of ginger girl. And, you know, I remember Chris and I talking about this when we first saw it, just being like, why was that like this big reveal? Like they play it out like it's supposed to be this big thing, like you're supposed to be like, oh,
right? Yeah.
Or you, and like I remember thinking, am I supposed to recognize this character?
Was it because she's like a kid?
Right. I think it's because she's a
I thought
girl.
it was Beckett and Thandie Newton's like child or something like that, or I was like, it must be a character from like a prequel.
It's because she's she's a young girl and she's not a monster.
That's their intention, but it left us all confused.
Yeah, I just immediately thought she was the Bidey Bye girl from Thunderdome.
Yeah, and I agree that now we're introducing this sort of rebellion element into it because, you know, they're trying to foreshadow Han's involvement in the rebellion later, and this is an early version of that, I think we're to assume. But it feels like they're cramming one too many things in here, and it doesn't really play out all that much, you know, like they sort of do a little at one point while the negotiation reversals are going on in the yacht, but it's not like they go into full rebellion. They just like shoot a few people. And
to me, I feel like they're setting up things for like, if this was going to be a trilogy, like, oh, we need to have this young girl who can go on more adventures and like be the origin story of the rebellion. And it's like, just do the Han Solo movie already. This is too long.
I do like the stuff that happens in the yacht. I like when Han goes up there to meet with Dryden Voss. And at that point, Beckett is, what does Beckett do? He leaves.
He leaves and comes back. It's so clunky.
Yeah, but I mean, why does he leave in the first place? I've already forgotten. And
he becomes a traitor.
No, you're no, I'm saying
he runs away. He's like, I will finally run away and do exactly what I said I would never do. It was just run away and be hunted. And then Han stupidly goes and tries to give him the coaxium.
But Han knows what he's doing because Han's making it seem like he doesn't have the coaxium with him, but he really does.
Right.
And, you know, Dryden, because Beckett has ratted him out to Dryden is thinking that this is fake coaxium that he's dealing with, but it's really the real thing. Like, I like that, the way that all plays out.
Yeah, that all works. That's memorable and fine. The switcheroo with the the old people and the uniforms outside.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about, the rebellion element, because it's not much of a, like, you think that they're going to like help them fight the Crimson Dawn.
Yeah, that's where it gets muddled.
Yes, but it's just like
Definitely.
a thing they do. They do a thing.
Yeah, they should have just stuck to the original, the situation between him
Yes.
and Dryden Voss and
They
Beckett.
don't play enough of a role in the story to matter, to be there.
Again, this is a Western. If you remember, like at the end of Once Upon a Time in the West, where it's like the three
Yeah.
of them. I'm trying to remember
It's Once Upon a Time
Sergio
in the West.
Yeah, and you've got the three characters, and they're at the end, and they duel, and you don't have the whole rest of all these sub characters all over the place, making that very confusing at your final conflict.
It's so forgettable what Enfys Nest and their group does that it's every time I get to this part in the movie, I'm like, oh yeah, they kind of do something. Like it so does not stick. But I do remember the sort of reversals in the in the yacht. I think it's pretty fun.
Oh, and we do get a Warwick Davis cameo. He's among
Yes.
the Enfys Nest, and I feel
He
like
gets a line too.
Yeah, they should make him be a clone, because he's like shows up everywhere in Star Wars. They should say he's like the other Jango Fett clone, because I think he's like in the prequels, and I feel like he's everywhere in Star Wars.
Now, this whole thing that's going on, this whole sort of back and forth, who's got the drop on who thing that's going on, is fun, but it's also, and maybe I'm looking a gift horse in the mouth here, but it's so low key for a Star Wars movie. Like in terms of like a climax, we're used to getting a big space battle and like all this kind of stuff for a climax. I kind of like that you don't get that here.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
get something way more grounded.
Totally.
But it's that weird sort of dichotomy of making you feel like, on one hand, I appreciate that they're not doing all of that, but on the other hand, I feel like this is kind of anticlimactic,
Yeah.
But you just had the Kessel Run. I mean, I feel like that was enough of a crazy epic
Yeah, sure.
thing. I mean, maybe if the Kessel Run had paid off a little bit more, you probably wouldn't feel this way.
There's sort of three climaxes,
Yeah.
right? So there's the Kessel Run, then there's the switcheroo and the death of Dryden Voss, and then his final meeting with Lando. And I always forget where this movie actually ended.
Yeah.
Like I have to try to go back and be like, they did the Kessel Run. No, wait, that wasn't the end of the movie. And then they didn't kill Dryden Voss. Like where, at what point? I'm already tired of at this point, and I'm ready to leave the screen, and I just feel like this movie hadn't made up its mind where the ending was.
Yeah. But, they have their kind of fight. Beckett takes off with the coaxium, and Han and Kira and Dryden have their fight. It's kind of a fun fight. Kira gets to kill Dryden. And then, we get this scene where Han runs off to get the coaxium from Woody, and we find out that the leader of the Crimson Dawn is our friend Darth Maul.
Oh, see, I again totally forgot about that, having just
How do you
seen
forget
seen it.
that? Come
Right.
on. That was the only thing I remembered the first time I saw it. I was like, Darth Maul shows up at the end. Like that was all I could remember from the movie the first time. You forgot that?
Well, I forget Darth Maul from the Phantom Menace. I don't remember how he dies. I forget what he's doing there. I know.
Dude, Darth Maul's badass.
So when he showed up, I was trying to remember what he was in charge of before.
Troy,
Like,
you're gonna know this shit because you're gonna have to explain this to your son about Darth Maul. You're gonna have to have a
he's
long.
gonna explain it all to
You're gonna
me.
have to have a long talk about Darth Maul in the not so distant future.
He shows up in Solo. That's all I can
You're
remember.
gonna have to explain how he got cut in half and how he got new legs in the Clone Wars animated series.
Oh my God.
And then he shows up.
This is hurting my
then
brain.
he shows up in Solo to the thrill of all.
But he's the head of the Crimson
I
Dawn.
think we're to assume that. Yes.
Probably pretty close to the time he gets killed, right?
No, he's not.
No, this is after.
This is after. He's got mechanical legs now.
Yeah, the prequels are way before.
What?
Yeah, he lived.
Oh my God. Okay.
He got chopped in half by
I
Obi-Wan
thought he
Kenobi.
got killed, so
listen.
This now it's totally confusing me with the
Listen,
timeline.
dude, I'm helping you out here. I'm helping you be a better father. He gets
All
chopped in half by Obi-Wan Kenobi after killing Liam Neeson. Qui-Gon Jinn.
But he doesn't die.
No, he does not die.
You see him squirm out of the picture?
No. I
Okay.
need you to take this
You
seriously.
see him cut down, and then that's all you see of Darth Maul?
He falls down a shaft. You assume that he's dead.
Ouch.
You're right, though. You assume he's dead. In the Clone Wars,
This
they
hurts.
revived him, and because he's so badass that everyone's like, it's like a Boba Fett.
So I have to see the Clone Wars now,
Yeah,
too?
you knew you were going to have to do that.
God.
It's all in your future. So yeah, they stitch him back together and give him mechanical legs. So who we see now is this new cyborg Maul. And you can tell when you watch it for your, 7th and 8th time watch, you can hear like the servos in his legs go as he stands up.
Is that why he stands up and lights his
right?
lightsaber?
Like I like that he lights his
powers up.
lightsaber because that's how you end your phone calls with people.
Right.
You like grab your best weapon and like sort of shove it in their face.
Yeah.
Like as soon as I'm off this, I'm gonna like end this call by like grabbing like my AK. Yeah, but come on, it's fan service. But I'd be lying if I didn't get a kick out of it when I first saw it. So yeah, we find out that Darth Maul is involved, and then we get the scene where Han confronts Beckett on the beach. Beckett tells him, I was always going to betray you and blah, blah, blah. And Han shoots first. And kills Beckett.
No, it was great. That's exactly what should have happened.
That was what you want. Yeah, that was totally satisfying. Yeah. That's exactly what should have happened.
Do you feel this healed the whole Han shooting second thing?
No, but it's a good attempt at it. It's a little McClunky, but
that was good, Chris.
Thanks.
Oh yes. So yeah, and that's basically that's the end of our plot until Han goes to some other planet and finds Lando. Although I don't know how Han and Chewie get out of here because they don't have a ship. They're on I guess we're just to assume they like stole a ship from someone somewhere.
Well, the Marauders.
The Marauders might have had a ship or something.
Helped them out.
Yeah, they must have helped them out.
They got him an Uber.
It doesn't matter, but yeah, I was thinking that this time. I'm like, how are they going to get out of here? Anyway, so they Han finds Lando. I really like
in probably Lando's best costume out of the movie.
I know, it's like this Hawaiian shirt or something awesome that he's wearing. It's really good.
I actually paused it to check out this shirt this time around.
And so yeah, he wins the Millennium Falcon by exposing Lando as a cheater. And credits roll, and that's Solo, a Star Wars story. Now, what do you looking at the movie now, what do you guys think works about this movie?
Okay, so as I said, like with each viewing of this, I kind of like this movie more and more. It really just went right over my head the first time. I wasn't that into it, but each time as sort of an escapist film, I do think it works. Mm-hmm. It's a fun movie. I think one of the things that we mentioned throughout this podcast is what's not working is structure, a real plan, and suspense and pacing. You just kind of feel like there's a lot of action scenes on top of each other.
Yeah.
With a lot of people running around and flying fast ships and a lot of people shooting guns. And it doesn't breathe.
Yeah.
And it doesn't give you the emotional beats to sort of set up the stakes. Mm-hmm. Like, again, I don't think that the relationship with Kira is quite working.
Yeah.
Initially from the very beginning on Corellia. I don't think she's set up right. Mm-hmm. It's not working for me. It doesn't work for Han Solo.
Yeah.
I don't see him frolicking with this girlfriend at all. That's just, I see him sort of tortured by somebody, but not, let's get our coaxium and get out of here together. So yeah, I think this film is a product of its making. It had a core idea. There was a lot of things crammed in here that for fan service, and that's initially what this film was about. So we have to hit these beats. We have to see the Millennium Falcon, got to do the Castle Run. With that being said, it narrowly kind of pulls these things together to be enjoyable. I'll say this is an enjoyable film.
Yeah.
Well, I think Lando is the only thing that is an A plus for me. You know, I really wanted to see more of him, and every time I rewatch the movie, I go straight to his scenes, and I kind of don't want to waste my time with anything else. You know, the movie's fine. I think it does its job adequately, like any Ron Howard movie does. I think by the end, I'm used to hit this new Han, and I would still see a sequel. Like, I think it'd be interesting to see what they would do, freed of the requirements to do a Kessel Run, and all right, let's just do a Han, Lando, Chewie like adventure story, and just like no empire, no nothing, just go ahead, let some writers explore the universe, which is kind of like what the Mandalorian does. It's a little bit of fan service, but then there's more exploration. And I feel like something like this might even benefit from, like, I'd rather see a solo TV series where they could do more things, and there's a little less pressure to be like this 2-hour blockbuster movie. Like, oh, that one episode was lame. Whatever. Like, let's have another one. And I feel like
a young Indiana Jones, another Harrison Ford,
bad
young.
bad comparison, but like I think it still could work. And maybe even a little bit edgier version of it would be better. That's, and I just think, to me, what doesn't work is, yeah, just the lack of edge. And I really think the color kind of bummed everyone out. I feel like everyone
Yeah.
who left the movie was kind of like, there's a reason why romantic comedies are bright and shiny and they make you feel good about life and everything. And this movie just felt dismal and muted and muddy, as in the way it looks and also its story.
The way, honestly, like the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie works so much for me because it's so
Yeah.
colorful. Like it's all purple and it
Exactly.
pops, and it's like I can just watch that movie because it's just so like crazy colored for a space adventure. I don't think that's right for Star Wars, but I think, I'm basically hitting on the same point that you're making, that like they should have tried to make this pop a little more visually.
Yeah.
It's
I
frustrating.
mean, Lando does, but that's it. I mean, his yellow shirt is like the highlight of the movie.
There's no reason this needed to have this sort of murky, visual aesthetic. But, I agree with Troy in the sense that, like, taken just as a whole and as it is, and if you can kind of walk yourself back from needing this to be like the perfect Han Solo prequel, like just
Sure.
operating on its own as its own thing, I think it's totally a fine, passable, entertaining movie. I've seen it a few times now, and each time I kind of come to the same conclusion that it's fine.
In your heart, we deserve better.
You're absolutely right.
Look, if you ever have to get together with your family or in-laws and everybody hates each other and they're going to get really drunk and there's going to be a lot of fights,
Okay.
this is the perfect movie to put on.
This Christmas, I'll try.
Yeah, well, I'm going to keep that in mind. This movie, and the reason why we're covering it here on Tentpole Trauma, is because it famously underperformed pretty spectacularly for a Star Wars movie. I mean, it still made millions and millions of dollars, but for a Star Wars movie, this was bad. Like, it didn't even make its production budget back, and its production budget ran way over and all that, so that even made it hurt even harder that it didn't really crack. I don't think it cracked 500 million worldwide, or it was somewhere around there, which for a Star Wars movie is dismal. All of them have broken into the $1 billion club, and this one didn't even get close. I think a lot of people were kind of feeling not so great about Star Wars after Last Jedi, and this came very close relatively to the release of Last Jedi, and I know that's been...
Oh, it came out like right after it.
Not right after. It was like it came out... Last Jedi came out in...
A year, right?
No. It came out about 6 months later. Last Jedi...
6 months. Oh,
Last
geez.
Jedi came out at Christmas. This came out in like summer. So...
Right.
They had to get that May slot again because that's when Star Wars movies used to come out, damn it. So they threw this out in May and people didn't really show up for it. I don't really buy that, Last Jedi put such a bad taste in people's mouth that they didn't want another Star Wars movie. I think it had more to do with the fact that this was a movie that no one wanted. Nobody wanted a Han Solo movie. They certainly didn't want one without Harrison Ford in it. And I think it was just like one of those cases where the concept was just kind of dead in the water.
I do disagree with you a little bit. I will say my wife, after Last Jedi, she was kind of done. She's not a Star Wars person, so I think Last Jedi did kind of sour some non-Star Wars people that just are out to go see a movie. So she was kind of done, and so a Han Solo movie was definitely not something, especially 6 months after Last Jedi.
Right. I think that's true. I think if you were a casual Star Wars fan and you didn't like Last Jedi, you weren't going to run out to see this 6 months later.
Yeah. So I think this is writing too soon after that, and I think Last Jedi turned off like you said, the casual moviegoer for Star Wars, and I don't think people wanted a Han Solo movie. Just like you said, I didn't want it. I didn't want to see Han Solo played by somebody else.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of effort to get on board with this. And, it's hard. You have to try to erase Harrison Ford out of your mind. So it's a kind of asks a lot of the audience.
Yeah. Too much, I think. I think it's just, I think we've sort of seen how far you can kind of push these things once, the nearer you get to some truly iconic characters played by iconic performances. And I think, this is where you can't go. You can't do Han Solo, probably can't do Luke. You probably can't do Leia.
Oh, yeah, that would be terrible. You can do all the subsidiary sub-characters, but not
let's get the young Mon Mothma movie going, man. Come on.
Please don't make a Yoda movie.
Yeah, please.
And what about Indiana Jones, like a young Indiana Jones movie series? I guess this does not bode well for that, right?
No, it does not.
I think the reason it didn't do well also is, obviously word of mouth is a huge part of a movie's success. And there's always people who loved Last Jedi and were like, that was amazing, you've got to go see it. I've never met anybody who's like, Solo was so amazing, you've got to go see it. I don't think anybody ever said that. Everyone's just like, yeah, it was fine, So the hardcore fans, of course, came out and saw it and represented. But when your uncle or sister says, oh, so how was that new Star Wars movie, and you go, it was fine, they're not going to go see it.
That's what I was like. I love Star Wars, and you guys were like, yeah, it's okay. So I just didn't have
No, you don't love Star Wars. If you loved it, you would have seen it opening night. Come on.
I think we've seen the limits of your love, Troy.
You don't even know Darth Maul's alive, Troy.
All right, secretly.
You had to have Darth Maul mansplained to you.
I hate Star Wars. God, I hate doing this podcast.
All right, guys. Well, I think that wraps it up for our Solo, a Star Wars story discussion. Thank you, Troy, for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks. Have a good one.
And I'm going to go make the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs.
Nice. Less than 12 parsecs.
Right, less than 12 parsecs.
Yeah, round down.
Round down. That about does it today for Tentpole Trauma. If you like what you heard, check out our social media presence on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Just look for Tentpole Trauma. That was easy, wasn't it? If you like us, hit subscribe and leave us a sterling review on iTunes, if you dare. If you really like us, head over to patreon.com and get involved in one of our fabulous tiers. You'll be glad you did. Want to communicate with Tentpole Trauma? Send an email to tentpoletrauma@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And who knows, one day you may even get your email read on one of our shows. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll see you real soon.